the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good afternoon to you. Just after 1 o'clock on Thursday, April the 3rd. I'm David Bull in for Ian Collins. Thanks ever so much for your company this afternoon. Now, coming up, Brexit has been hailed as the UK's saviour from the worst of Donald Trump's tariff blitz, saving thousands of jobs, but ministers call the 10% levy a disappointment as they consider retaliatory tariffs. Meanwhile, Turkish barbershops have been raided by police with dozens of businesses uncovered as fronts for money laundering, leading to the seizure of hundreds of thousands of pounds in cash. And the Met Police will cut services and lose 1,700 officers and staff to address a £260 million budget shortfall. Wait for this. At the same time, the London Mayor Sadiq Khan is pouring millions into net zero initiatives. What do you make of that? Let me know your thoughts, please, this afternoon. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X as well at talkTV. Well, a very good afternoon to you. Of course, we're talking about Thursday tariffs. As I was saying to Julia, I woke up this morning. I hadn't heard what those tariffs were, and I did allow myself a slight grin and a chuckle at the way the European Union had been treated. I could tell from Ursula von der Leyen that she wasn't exactly happy with what had gone on. But it is quite remarkable that Trump announced those tariffs. So, as you probably know, Donald Trump has announced tariffs of 10% on Britain as part of a declaration of economic independence by the United States. The real key for me here is actually, I think this is a really tangible benefit of Brexit. Because we have disassociated from the European Union, we're not treated in the same way the rest of the EU or the EU is being treated, and we're being treated differently. Now, the UK has actually got the lowest levy, that is 10%. China, however, has been hit with a tariff of 34%. And as I said, the European Union faces a 20% levy. Now, there are real complications to this. There is also an imposition of 25% on foreign car imports. That has already come into effect, and that, we'll talk more about this actually, and the way it will actually impact the British car industry in this country. The interesting thing is Downing Street is trying to spin this to say this vindicates our approach that we've actually been talking to the United States. We are almost there in trying to secure a free trade agreement, but you're not there, are you? You have failed to do that. The Conservative Party failed to do that as well. Let's talk more about this. Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, joins me this afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What do you make of this? I mean, my overriding feeling was that Donald Trump was determined to hit the ground running. He imposed the blanket tariff across the world, the lowest being 10%, and of course we fall into that. But some of those are incredibly draconian.
Yeah, I from the start, I think this is going to play very badly for him. I think this is probably going to end up causing a recession in the United States overall. It's also interesting that the US is calling these reciprocal tariffs, but it's imposing them even on countries where it has a trade surplus, i.e. it actually trades more with that country or exports more to that country than it imports back. The most difficult thing, I think, for Trump's supporters to justify is the fact that apparently Russia and North Korea are exempt from this new regime, which is just absolutely baffling. But in the domestic terms, 10% is definitely not ideal. There will be economic pain in this country, but it's obviously half as bad as 20% would have been.
Or quite.
So yeah, exactly. That is an immediate dividend, and it's been interesting trying to see people trying to spin it that actually it doesn't make any difference. When you can just imagine if the EU had got 10 and we got 20, my God, would we be hearing about how
well 100%. And actually that was the reason that I felt actually pleased this morning, because it actually does show that if we actually have the bottle to say we are a sovereign, independent country and we do things differently away from the European Union, and remember, the US is our biggest trading partner anyway, so this is paramount.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tricky position because we're between several large blocks, and obviously, ideally, you want to be trading lots with all of them, of course. But the problem is, as we've seen, that large blocks like to try and use their heft to set the rules in their own favor. Now, this is not just a thing that America does. Obviously, I think the scale of Trump's tariffs are unprecedented, but the European Union has the common external tariff, right, on all agricultural goods, which was basically pure protectionism, pricing food from the rest of the world out of the European market to protect French farmers. So this is absolutely not something that only America engages in. The opportunity for a country like Britain, if we're prepared to be nimble, is that we can strike deals which much better reflect the balance of our economy and our exports. For example, inside the European Union, as I'm sure you know, we've never managed to quite get that single market for services that we've been promised for I don't know how many decades, despite the fact that Britain is a service economy. But obviously, the flip side is that if you play that hand badly, or the government is asleep at the wheel, you can end up getting crushed between very large trading blocks.
And of course, last night, I think Downing Street very concerned about what these tariffs were going to be. They had no idea, no forewarning of this. In terms of Rachel Reeves and her budget, she sort of massaged her figures, shall we say, to give herself that tiny fiscal headroom. Now, clearly, we now have big economic headwinds. That is going to pretty much wipe out all of her headroom. And that means that she is going to have to either cut spending even further or increase taxes, the very thing she said she wouldn't do.
Yeah, Rachel Reeves basically made exactly the same gamble in the spring statement that she made in the budget, which is that despite the fact that politicians always complain that the OBR's forecasts are wrong so often and can't be relied on, she went right up to the wire, right? She went right up to, she imagined that those forecasts would be correct almost to the decimal place. If you read the OBR report on the spring statement, it gave her, I think, a 56% chance of hitting one of her rules and 52%. Exactly, right? And that was on the assumption, the first time in the budget, she was making numbers in the budget, she was making two bets, right? Trump won't get elected and Trump won't do tariffs. In the spring statement, that one of those things had already happened. So she was basically making a massive bet that A, the OBR's forecasts were right anyway, but B, that there wasn't a massive disrupting event like Donald Trump, which frankly, she should have prepared for, and she should have left herself some leeway. She didn't. And now, as you say, the basis upon which she produced the spring statement is almost certainly going to be wildly off, and that does mean tax rises, spending cuts, or both.
Do you think this is ineptitude? Is it inexperience? Is it because she's the wrong person for the wrong job?
Honestly, I think it's wishful thinking. I think that the government is, and any government, in fairness, would be in a very difficult position at this point, because basically the British politics, the scope of British politics is getting narrower and narrower and narrower, because the cost of borrowing and servicing our debt is going up. The cost of paying for the state that we have and the entitlements that we have is going up. And our tax base is stagnant. Amazingly, our tax base is stagnant despite mass immigration, which is a really quite phenomenal, in a bad way, achievement to have. And so what do? You simply try and keep the show on the road. You try and get through one more year, and you hope, and this is the thing that the government's really just doing, you just hope that growth comes back. Because you talk to any of the politicians and what they'll tell you is, oh, I think we all agree that what we need is growth. Because with growth, when you have a projection of growth, you can draw on those future tax receipts to pay off current spending. But there's no evidence that it's coming back yet, and that's why they keep digging themselves deeper into this hole.
There is a brilliant article I want to talk about later, which is about economics generally and the Laffer curve. And the fact is that if you continually tax people, then of course you are going to reduce your tax burden overall because people leave the country. That is what we're already seeing. So Rachel Reeves has some lessons to learn. I do feel deeply sorry for those people in the car industry, and particularly Jaguar Land Rover. As we know, the US is the largest export market. 58.7 billion of British goods goes to the United States. And of course, 1 in 8 cars built in the United Kingdom is actually exported to the US. That's worth £6.4 billion. That is not to be sniffed at.
No, no, absolutely not. And that's why we have to hope that the government can continue working towards a freer trade agreement with the United States. But we also have to remember all of the other things that we've done in this country to hammer our manufacturing industries, right? Even before these tariffs, we were having chemical plants, car manufacturers, steel makers, all starting to shut their doors in this country. Why? Because we have the highest industrial energy prices in Europe, primarily, and then other reasons as well. So we absolutely need to do more to bolster British manufacturing. It's all very well having a service economy, but there's so many critical technologies coming down the line, especially if we're going to end up, as it seems we might, in a much more fragmented world than we have been used to living in. It's really important to have native manufacturing capacity for a lot of sort of critical technologies. But it's not just tariffs. One good thing that might come out of this tariff war, because I do think it will make everyone poorer, is the realization that actually, no, we can't afford to be the only country in the G20 other than Saudi Arabia that can't manufacture virgin steel, right? And we can't afford to import critical technologies. We can't afford to be solely reliant on Taiwan for the flow of computer chips that makes everything work. That's the kind of big picture strategic thinking that we've been missing. And if this causes us to start focusing on that problem properly, it won't necessarily be worth all of the pain that a tariff war will cause, but it will at least be a silver lining.
And of course, you mentioned steel there. We're closing all our blast furnaces. We're moving over to electric blast furnaces, all in the name of net zero. That, to me, makes no economic sense at all. In terms of other industries being hit, AstraZeneca, GSK, which are huge pharmaceutical companies in this country, they rely heavily on the United States for sales. Astra raked in £18 billion from American customers last year, 43% of its total sales. GSK 16.4 billion, that's half its sales for 2024, and the major market for those pharmaceutical companies is the US. This will have a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely it will. It is important to note that however we think politically to view getting 20% versus other people getting 20%, getting 10% versus other people getting 20%, like 10% tariffs across the board is still painful, because that means that if America passes all of those on to the consumer, or our exporters pass all of them on to the consumer, that means that suddenly our exports in America have just jumped up by 10%, right? That British car that an American was maybe thinking of buying, now it's 10% more expensive, less competitive versus an American car. Now, of course, this is where the challenge comes with reciprocal tariffs, right? Because on the one hand, there's always an element of, okay, well, if they're doing it to us, we should do it to them, we should stand up to them, and so on. And there might be a case for tariffs in some cases to protect strategic industries like steel and so on. But the thing about a general scheme of tariffs is that it would work in reverse. Everything we import from America would become X% more expensive for the consumer. Now, you think about the amount of things in our shops and in our homes that are American manufactured, then that suddenly risks pushing up the cost of living, right? At a time when Brits are already paying an almost record share of tax since the end of the war, when housing costs are at record highs, when the cost of energy is at record highs. Can the government really afford, in the name of standing up to Donald Trump, which a lot of people are shouting at it to do, to make the cost of living crisis even worse for hundreds of thousands of families?
Well, it's interesting you say that. Of course, we've just heard a statement in the House of Commons saying that the UK will take a sort of a more considered decision whether there is some sort of retaliatory tariff which is then levied on the United States. I think this is quite a complicated situation to be in, because on one hand you want to secure an FTA, on the other hand you don't want to be browbeaten by Donald Trump.
Well, there is an argument, of course, that having reciprocal tariffs would actually incentivize the Americans to have an FTA, because the whole point of a free trade agreement is that it breaks down trade barriers on both sides to the benefits of both sides' exporters and importing customers. Now, if you have a situation where the stronger side has erected a whole load of trade barriers but actually doesn't face that many trade barriers going the other way, what incentive do they have to sign an FTA? Because suddenly the FTA just becomes an act of charity. And if they were feeling charitable, they wouldn't have whacked the tariffs on in the first place. So that is actually a really interesting consideration, which is, if we do want to get a free trade agreement with the United States, one, I mean, is that actually possible? Two, are we prepared to make the concessions that would be needed, for example, on US agricultural exports and so on? And whilst there are specific problems about that, Britain just generally had a really unhelpful attitude in trade where we demand that other people open their markets to us and then piously refuse to let their imports back in because of our very high standards. But then three, is the government willing and able to create a tariff regime toothy enough for the Americans to think that it's worth trading off their own tariff regime? And if they are, is the British public prepared for the price shock that would create? And could the government survive it long enough to get that FTA over the line?
And of course, as you say, if this does blow up into a full trade war, of course, the cost of that is thought to be around £1 trillion. Now, just in terms of the EU, and I just want to finish on them very quickly before we go to the break. I mean, clearly the EU is absolutely incensed by what is going on. Ursula von der Leyen, I've never seen her face so red as a result of what is going on. Now, the EU is also planning some sort of action against the United States. But many of my friends in Europe called me this morning to say, and I watched the markets this morning actually at 8 o'clock when they opened, and we saw the markets nosedive. That being said, the pound has actually gone up in value.
Yeah, the European Union has been hit by American tariffs, as we say, to a higher level. And of course, it's the speculators on the currency. It's not just a reflection of the tariffs, the different tariffs, but it's a reflection maybe of some hope that maybe actually there is a relationship to be developed between the United Kingdom and America, which could make the UK a good place to invest. So that is good for Britain. The challenge for the European Union, there will be lots of people in the European Union who love the idea of coming up with reciprocal tariffs and so on. But one, can they really afford that when they have just tried to come up with, I think, 800 billion in revenue to assist Ukraine and to rearm, European rearmament? If the European economy really takes a hit and revenues fall, that whole rearmament program is going to go out of the window. But two, the European Union is in many ways just getting a taste of its own medicine, because the European Union is built around strong protective tariffs around outside the European Union. It is built around exporting regulation, being a regulatory superpower, getting people it trades with to sign up to its rules and its values. And it really isn't pleasant when it happens the other way, but hopefully there's a lesson in that for some people.
Certainly. Henry, thanks for the moment. Let me just ask everyone at home this question then. Are we seeing the first dividend of Brexit? That was what I thought this morning. The fact is that we are a sovereign democratic country. We are no longer in the European Union, and we are now being treated differently. So are we seeing the first Brexit dividend? Let me know your thoughts, please. 0344 499 1000. So many of you getting in touch. Vinny says, hi, David, you watch. Starmer and Reeves blame the next disastrous few years on the Trump tariffs. It will be like a get-out-of-jail card free. Great show, Vinny. Thanks very much. Who's in Charente in France. Lots of you getting in touch about a free trade. Alex in Essex. David, is this now the time to be discussing a free trade, free movement, a military alliance under the Cans UK movement? Imagine the economic and political power trading bloc of Canada, Australia, New Zealand and the UK could have on the world when the US is receding into itself. Keep all of those messages coming in. I'll continue our conversation with Henry after this break. This is Talk.
that since 1999, 101 of our fellow citizens have been murdered by terrorists, of whom 94 out of 101 were Islamist terrorists. That is the kind of risk we can't ignore, and where people like this come through the system, they should be properly risk assessed. And the fact the guy says he has a mental health condition, or maybe even has got a mental health condition, that should not prevent risk assessments being done.
And this is a problem, isn't it, for an awful lot of cases.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk, 22 minutes past 1. I'm in conversation with Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Now, this is quite a story. Police have raided a string of Turkish barbershops and seized more than £500,000 in illegal cash during a crackdown on money laundering. Quelle surprise. Body cam footage shows officers smashing their way into the businesses, and as we know, they're increasingly used as fronts by criminal gangs. The police seized more than £500,000 in dirty cash, arrested 7 people after sweeping in on 33 premises. That was just last month. Well, Nigel Farage has posted a video to his X account highlighting his find of a rare English barbershop just the other day. Let's take a listen and a watch to what Nigel posted.
There's a barber's that's not Turkish. What, a barber's that pays tax?
Yeah.
No, surely
we
not.
are the only one that takes card.
You're not.
Apparently.
You're going to tell me you actually have customers.
Yeah.
But there's literally thousands of them, isn't there, sprung up all over the country. Turkish barbers.
Oh no, it's ridiculous, isn't it? And there's only more coming as well.
Racket, the whole thing.
But lovely to meet you.
Good luck.
Genuinely.
Good luck. Nice to meet you. Yeah. Yeah, I'll get in the chair. So there you are. We have found a barber's shop that doesn't have a Turkish sign out the front, that actually has customers, and there's no Lamborghini out the back. Isn't that unusual in modern Britain?
And of course, Nigel caught me off guard because that was on April the 1st and I thought he really did have a tattoo. Henry, your thoughts on this? I mentioned it on Friday at an event I was hosting, saying the proliferation of barbershops across the United Kingdom is so absurd. They aren't Turkish anyway. They're Albanian, they're Kurds, they're all sorts of other nationalities. How much hair do we have as a nation? Because they're all empty, and clearly something untoward is going on, and the police are now finally catching up.
Yeah, well, this is, it's not just barbershops, of course. If you live in London, or I imagine other large cities, you'll be aware of the curse of the American candy store.
Yes.
Which has £20 sort of packs of stale Oreos from the United States and 0 customers. And the only people who go in there are the ones who want the illegal vapes with way more nicotine in than you can get in Britain. But other than that, nothing, somehow affording central London premises. It's money laundering. Obviously, we should be clear. Not every Turkish barbers is a money laundering operation, and there are plenty of legitimate barbershops run by people from all over the world. But yes, it's money laundering. Barbershops are a high cash business. They're one of the relatively few sorts of business these days which manage to get away with operating in cash, which more and more people don't even carry, because you don't need much of it. You can get a haircut for a tenner in a barbershop, at least according to the price list in the window. Whether or not it will actually cut your hair is a different question. And so that means that they can put all this cash through, cash that can be from criminal operations, drug sales and so on. They can put it through the books of the barbershop, and all of a sudden it comes out as clean money that they can own and they can spend in the economy without being worried that it's going to be traced back to criminal activities. So that's what the proliferation of this sort of shop is about. It's of course partly tied up with the death of the high street. Fewer and fewer people are doing travel to retail anymore. That means that there's an awful lot of empty spaces. The ones that aren't taken up by charity shops, well, criminal gangs can put some of them to use. And I'll just tell you, funny story, there used to be one of these opposite a friend of mine's house, and he didn't notice. He hadn't really clocked what it was. There were bars on the windows of the back, but he hadn't really clocked it. So one day he was in a hurry and he went in to get a haircut. And this terrified 22-year-old gave him the worst haircut of his life, didn't charge him, and then the next day he walked past and it had shut, and it reopened 3 days later as a sandwich shop.
How interesting. What I didn't realise was the barbershops actually don't have to register with Companies House. You can operate as a sole trader, and that is part of the problem. That loophole hasn't been closed as of yet.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because one, you can operate. I actually don't know if other people are allowed to operate as a sole trader and have premises.
Well,
I
that's
can't
what I
immediately.
thought.
But I can't immediately think why it would be illegal. I'm not an expert on this. I read that story and I was just there going, hold on a minute. Yeah, because I used to be a sole trader before I had a business. And I was like, well, could I have just rented office space as a sole trader? Anyway, but the other thing actually is that a lot of them, they are sole traders. And what happens is that somebody with a barber's shop rents a chair, right? So instead of it being, I have a barber shop, I employ my hairdressers, it is, I have the building and I get the chairs and the equipment, and then I rent a space in that building to the hairdresser or barber who is legitimately a sole trader. And of course, that just makes things even murkier because then you actually, it's even better because you've got some legitimate business going on in that shop, which adds more cover and more confusion if you're also running criminal proceeds through it.
Let's talk about social cohesion because it's kind of a tangential conversation. This is an article in the Daily Mail saying we can't take any more, says locals in a city. This is in Glasgow. The asylum system is wrecking social cohesion in Glasgow because the city is over encumbered with migrants being sent to the city by the government. 3,953 were sent to the city by the Home Office whilst the applications of the asylum seekers were being considered. 240 others were in emergency accommodation. By February 2024, another 1,000 people had also come to the city. This is a major problem, isn't it, Henry? I've seen it all over the country. I was in Boston, actually, with Richard Tice, and I saw this. Young men of a certain age all hanging out in the centre of Boston. Lack of social cohesion. I actually didn't feel safe in the centre of Boston, and that is what people reported to me when I stopped them and asked them what was going on in their local area.
Yeah, so this is a confluence of two problems. The first, which we've been done to death, is obviously the asylum system in general. The fact that we are not able to police the people who come here, the fact that we're not able to deport them, or it's certainly not able to deport enough of them quickly enough. But the specific problem that causes things like this is that successive governments have refused to just invest the money in building a purpose-built asylum estate. Right, there are lots of old, like, disused airfields, big sort of plots in the countryside where you could put dormitories and you could put the health facilities and so on they need. You could have Home Office facilities there, and you could mean that whilst these people were having their claims processed, they could be kept in a secure location with all the amenities that they might need as human beings, but also without disrupting communities. And instead of doing that, what's happened is that the government has simply allowed more and more people to come in, and it has just distributed them where it can around the country. It was the big row over hotels, the Home Office turning local businesses, sometimes in smaller communities, really important local businesses, into effectively dormitories for asylum seekers because the government can outbid private providers. And then, most extraordinarily, the Labour government was fleetingly considering shifting away from hotels and putting them in private rented and social accommodation all over the country during a housing crisis, right? There's simply no way around this. This country does not have enough homes. It's already got a horrible cost of living. If politicians want to keep allowing this many people to come into the country and keeping them here while they process their claims, they need to build somewhere to put them that isn't simply offloading them onto communities around the country.
And also, you might argue that if you had these facilities that have been built bespoke, that would also act as a disincentive. At the moment, of course, you come to this country, you get a lovely hotel, you get all your meals paid for, you get a little coach to go shopping, and then it takes you back to your accommodation. I mean, that is hardly putting you off coming to this country, is it?
No, and also it would make it harder for you to abscond because, of course, what do we find time and time again? Somebody games the system, and if they're not clever enough, if their claim gets rejected, some of them, intelligently, if awfully, will then just do something to make sure their claim gets accepted, like that guy who was from Iran, and after his claim was rejected, he set up a blog attacking the Ayatollahs. And then his lawyers were like, well, now, if he goes back to Iran, the Ayatollahs will kill him. And we were like, well, okay, he gets to stay here forever. But the others will just abscond because we have a huge black economy in this country. It's very, very hard to catch people. We don't have ID cards or anything like that. It's very hard to police employment or renting. If you're a Deliveroo driver, a registered Deliveroo driver, the company allows you to just subcontract your account to anyone you like, and it's up to you to do the employment checks on that person. So it's very easy to work in this country illegally. And so that's the other danger, is if they're distributed all over the place, if they're living in a hotel or a private home somewhere, and they get the news back saying, actually, no, you've been rejected, you're going to have to go back to your home country, they just vanish.
Well, absolutely right. And of course, they talked about it, as you say, with Wethersfield, with Scampton, with the Birby Stockholm. And of course, we've seen absolutely no progress on any of that. Let's just talk very quickly about the Met Police. We've talked about spiralling crime rates in the capital. And of course, the big story this afternoon is Britain's biggest police force will cut services and lose 1,700 officers. This is absolutely ridiculous for a start. They're losing all of the Royal Parks teams. But if that wasn't bad enough, they're also spending £1.4 billion a year. This is London, Sadiq Khan, on net zero. None of that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you do have to. The first response on hearing the story may be slightly cynical as well. What does the Metropolitan Police actually do? Because if you're a Londoner, then you'd hope so. But you'll have either had this or you'll know this, where somebody's had a bike stolen or a phone or a laptop, and they've traced it to the exact building. They've gone to the police, and the police have said actually they can't do anything. Crush Crime, the campaign led by Lawrence Newport. The other day, it had ended up with a stolen bike outside. It did a stunt where it got a stolen bike and ended up with it outside Scotland Yard. Police couldn't do anything about it. So Londoners can already be forgiven for being cynical about the Met. But yes, it is absolutely shocking because, of course, shoplifting is going up. You know, it's lots and minor kinds of crime. 50% of British police forces have a burglary clearance rate of 0. And the British public, understandably, want the police to be cracking down on this kind of thing because it's one of the very, very basics. We keep spending money on all kinds of things. You mentioned net zero, but you know, look at the Motability scheme, which has absolutely ballooned over the last few years. You look anywhere in the British state, and it's spending money on all kinds of what we might call nice to haves, while at the same time, the absolute basics of what being a government is: policing, a functioning court system, controlling your borders, defence. Those are all underfunded and barely functional.
Sorry, the reason I laugh is because it sounds like a wish list.
Right? You'd think, but if you went back 100 years, anyone from then until the dawn of human civilization would think those things were the things that government did. All the rest of it was called civil government and was sort of done in an afternoon when people had the time. But we've now ended up in a position where so many of the very basic things that government is supposed to do for people are just not being done. And yes, this cut means that, you know, the parks teams, okay, maybe first glance, the parks seem to be, but yes, because London has lots of lovely parks that are big and dark at night, and people can get attacked in them, people can trade drugs in them. Having parks teams policing those spaces, keeping them safe for women especially, is really important.
Yes,
and it's a crime that this funding cut has gone ahead.
Henry, always good to talk to you. Thanks very much for your time. That's Henry Hill, their Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Lots of messages coming in about the tariffs. I'm asking this afternoon, do you think this is actually a Brexit dividend? Is it really the first tangible Brexit dividend? As Henry said, imagine if it had been the other way round. Imagine if the EU had been hit by 10% and the UK had been hit by 20%. We wouldn't hear the last of it. So the question is, are we actually seeing the first Brexit dividend? The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Now, after the break, I'm going to be talking more about the tariffs. What do they mean? What does it mean in terms of the United Kingdom and inflation, interest rates? What will it mean for you? I'll be talking to Justin Urquhart-Stewart, who is a great economist who hopefully will shed some light on what is going on. I'm also going to be talking to Bob Blackman, MP, who's the Conservative MP for Harrow East and the chair of the Backbench Business Committee. Is it a failure of the former Conservative government that they didn't get a free trade deal? Or is it a failure of Labour or the two of them? I'll be asking those questions after this break.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's talk about these tariffs. So this is Liberation Day, according to Donald Trump. Make America wealthy again. A baseline tariff on all imports, regardless of country. That's 10% across the board for the UK, Singapore, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, Turkey, Colombia, Argentina, El Salvador, UAE and Saudi. Now, he then calls the worst offenders, the EU, at 20%, which has caused some angst over the channel. China, 54%. Vietnam, 46%. Thailand, 36%. Japan 24%, Cambodia 49%. Now, on first glance, it looks that these are pretty random. Let's talk to Bob Blackman first, who is a Member of Parliament for Harrow East and the chair of the Backbench Business Committee. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Is it what we expected? I mean, we knew Donald Trump was going to hit the ground running, and this morning, as I said, I didn't know what he'd done until I woke up this morning, and then I saw the 10% for the United Kingdom, 20% for the EU. As a prominent Brexiteer, I did have a wry smile. That being said, of course, I'd rather it was zero for the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, basically, this is the first instalment of the Brexit dividend that the British people have been promised. I mean, the reality is that what Donald Trump is trying to do is to force companies to manufacture goods and produce services within the United States. These will be tariffs, obviously, that apply to imports to the United States. So it means that when we're selling goods or services to our United States allies, that's increased the cost, which then makes their homegrown products and services seem less expensive. However, of course, there is a risk for the United States that some of those companies within the United States may increase their prices domestically. So it may not actually achieve what he wishes to achieve.
Well, it's interesting. Sorry, I was just going to say, well, of course, the US is the UK's largest export market, buying 58.7 billion of British goods. This is the point I keep trying to make to my friends about the European Union. The United States is so integral to our trading relationships, to the prosperity of this country.
Yes, absolutely. And in the last government, we weren't looking so much as a trade deal with the entirety of the United States, but trying to do trade deals with different states. I mean, you look at Texas, for example, where a deal was being done. That's a bigger economy than most countries in Europe. And so actually doing a direct trade deal with Texas or one of the other states is far more valuable to us than many of the other trade deals that we would negotiate around the world. And, you know, here the crunch, I think, is coming. Donald Trump is clearly taking on China in a big way. China exports to the world using slave labor to manufacture goods and services. So the reality is that, I mean, he's saying that, you know, you're not going to export to the States with goods that are made by slave labor and then dump them on the world. So there are risks for us here. And one of the risks, and I haven't got to the bottom of this yet, because the other thing that he announced yesterday was a global tariff of 25% on vehicles. And whether that 25% is going to apply to British goods, that will be very serious for our car production facilities, because my understanding is we export something like 18% of the cars that we produce in this country to the United States. So that will make them more expensive. On the other hand, the cars that we do provide to the United States tend to be the more luxury models, and so the people that buy them are likely to just say, okay, fair enough, I'll pay the extra money. But that's all got to be assessed. And of course, in this country now, we've got the problem of the national insurance increases. We've got the unemployment bill going through Parliament, which is going to make it more expensive for employers to employ people locally. And then you've got the position of tariffs, and potentially, I mean, this is the risk, that other countries then embarking on a similar type of operation, which then could impact the United Kingdom quite severely. It also means that there's a greater emphasis now on the government to ensure we have those free trade deals around the world, because that will cushion us against what is going on with our friends in the United States.
So I do actually have some figures. 1 in 8 cars built in the United Kingdom is exported to the US. Now, Jaguar Land Rover, of course, as you say, it's a luxury brand. It makes no cars in the United States. 25,000 jobs could be at risk here. And, of course, we're talking about Aston Martin, we're talking about McLaren. I take the point that actually if you're spending all that money anyway, then the imposition of 10% won't actually make a great deal if you've got that much cash in your pocket. But we're also talking about Minis, for example, which is part of that brand as well. This is a huge problem. You've got the pharmaceutical companies like AstraZeneca, like GSK. This is a major market, and those are major companies in this country. And, of course, they are the pinnacle of scientific research and development in this country.
Absolutely, and we don't want those companies to cease to operate in the United Kingdom. We had this position, as you know, on Merseyside, where the current government failed to agree the deal with AstraZeneca, and as a result, they basically pulled out of a market. We've got the challenge at the moment in Scunthorpe, where the steelworks there may be closed down. Which would then lead us to being in a position of being the only G7 country not manufacturing steel in the world. So I mean that's a disaster for us. So there's a lot of impact here. As we know, that when the United States imposes things like this, it's disruptive to world trade generally. So we're hearing from the government that they're looking at whether they'll retaliate, and they're consulting on that right now. I worry that if we start retaliating, then what will happen is that we'll end up with an escalation, and the tariffs barriers on the UK will increase from the United States.
And to be fair to Keir Starmer, last night he was saying, well, you know, in the House he was saying, well, we need to be cool and calm and collected. We need to think about what we're doing pragmatically. That seems to have changed. Jonathan Reynolds now basically saying they're looking at how government could impose retaliatory tariffs on the United States. He says we're going to have a 4-week opening of a window where the government will ask major companies what they think about how the best way to retaliate. That is completely the wrong thing to do, in my humble opinion.
I agree with you, and I think what we should be doing is saying, OK, how could we reduce our non-tariff barriers to the United States and negotiate a reduction in that 10% tariff, rather than looking at retaliatory action that will only lead to that tariff barrier going up again if we do so.
Well, so it's interesting. You mentioned the Brexit dividend there. So we tax US cars at 10%. That's a hangover from the European Union. American levies a 2.5% tariff on vehicles made in Britain. Now, clearly, you could say, well, we need to have parity across the board. That would please Trump.
Indeed. And if we did that, no doubt he would respond accordingly. That's what he's aiming to do, by the way. I mean, if you look at what's happened between his next nearest neighbours, Mexico and Canada, there, a lot of US firms decided to literally move across the border and manufacture their goods in Mexico or Canada, and then as a result, of course, reducing wages for members of those companies, and actually leading to a position whereby they were getting a cheaper goods that they then exported to the United States, which then exported jobs from the US to those countries. Now, he imposed the tariffs there, and all of a sudden, changes have taken place. What he's doing now is throughout the world imposing those tariffs and saying to the world, well, you've got to manufacture in the United States if you want to supply to us. Now, we can respond to that by saying, no, we'll reduce our tariffs and non-tariff barriers to goods coming into the UK from the United States. The good news about that, of course, is that that would reduce the costs to consumers in the UK, would probably lead to growth in the United Kingdom economy, which is desperately needed, as we know. At the moment, we basically have zero growth in our economy, and as they start to generate worldwide trade, we as a country depend on worldwide trade. It is in our best interests for free trade to exist across the world. We might want to say we don't want certain goods to come into this country. That's a choice that we make. They've always got a chlorinated chicken and such like. We might make that choice, but that's a different issue. What we need to be looking at is how we lower these barriers and get free trade going and growing the economy, not only in the United Kingdom, but around the world, so that people can become prosperous, not only in our local economies in the UK, but across the world, which benefits everyone.
Bob, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That's Bob Blackman, MP, Conservative Member of Parliament for Harrow East and Chair of the Backbench Business Committee. Let's talk to Justin Urquhart-Stewart now, who is my favourite economist because he actually makes things make sense. Good afternoon, Justin.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to speak to you again.
Well, look, Justin, you and I speak a lot at the weekends, on my show at the weekend, just in terms of these tariffs. What does it mean for us as consumers? Because Rachel Reeves has wiped out her own fiscal headroom. You and I spoke about the fact that she's got such limited fiscal headroom anyway. She only managed it by fiddling the figures. Now we've got the tariffs coming in here. We've got British businesses that are really worried about what is going to happen. I think the government really doesn't have a plan as to what it's doing. The government says, right, we're working on this free trade agreement. We're almost there. I don't believe you. What are your initial thoughts on this?
Well, I think, first of all, to look at the bigger picture of this, I think we have to be really careful when we're dealing with global trade agreements, because history, we learn from history, and we can see what happened in the back in the 20s and 30s, when we saw what happened there, when we saw the global trade effectively grind down, and we went through a depression. And I'm not saying we're going to head for a depression now, but we could find ourselves with a global recession quite easily if people behave stupidly with this. What we've got to be able to do is actually try and make sure that trade keeps on going. Velocity of money through the economy, more money being spent on a regular basis. If you start slowing that up, you're slowing up the economy, and therefore you will end up slowing up not just growth, but actually the ability to actually create wealth. And that's how you end up finding yourself heading towards a recession. So let's be careful with that one. Secondly, of course, as you quite rightly said, we have got ourselves a benefit of Brexit here by not being allied to what has happened with the EU, who really find themselves in an incredibly difficult position now, because they've got a group of very, very different countries, some of whom are very dependable on exports, such as France and Germany, and find themselves in difficulty with other countries in that same group who have different economic issues. So it's going to be very difficult for them to actually find a proper leadership and continuity, or continuity, actually making sure consistency of planning to make sure that the whole group moves together. I don't think it can.
Well, so this is the really interesting point for me, which is Ursula von der Leyen has now said they are planning their retaliatory tariffs. And of course, she and the rest of the European Union, I know them well, and I know they'll go in hard. So if they impose 20% tariffs across the board for the United States, and if the United Kingdom actually bides its time, and we do what Bob said, reduce our own tariffs and box cleverly, we could actually come out of this much better than the European Union.
Absolutely right. Well, now is the time not to be big and butch and sit there and start sort of playing D'Artagnan with our FAs and saying we're actually going to be sort of fighting trade wars around the world in gentlemanly style. No, now the time to actually be quite straightforward about it. We need more trade done on a fair basis. Now, some countries have been dumping, as we all well know, what China have been doing, and other areas, and sometimes it gets diverted to other countries, such as Vietnam and Cambodia, because what they're doing is just trying to avoid other barriers. So it's very difficult to actually reach an agreement the entire time which is consistent. What we need to be able to do with our own areas is to be able to say, right, where are the key areas for our export? Now, luckily, okay, of course, actually, our trade with America is roundabout square. You were just talking about the car industry, and of course, it's the top end of the car industry that's being affected. Whereas you take something like Germany, there, of course, they've got the right to the middle end of the car industry, and they really get hit really quite hard for it. Actually, we make most of our money in, of course, services, and particularly financial services, which really hadn't been talked about in this at all. And so that's where we need to try and make sure our focus is, to make sure we can keep on growing and making ourselves as clear, efficient, and independent as possible, so that people want to come and do their business with us here, free of any other form of tax or other anything else which is seen as a delay or a sea anchor to them doing proper, profitable trading here. So now is the time to make ourselves look as free and independent as possible. And again, go back to the 30s, where you saw diametrically the opposite happening, people arguing over trade issues, trade slowed up, and you end up then with a global, not recession in that case, yes, or a global depression. Now, we don't have to go down that route at all. So now is the time not to be big and butch about it, to be a clear head, to be sensible, And we don't have to do the same as everybody else because our economy is different. But what we can do, though, is just make sure we can make it clearer, simpler and easier so that people in this country understand what's going on. And as we've discussed before, the primary driver of this, of our economy is the consumer, you and I. You and I going up, whether it's moving house or having supper or whatever it is. Now is the time you need to encourage the consumer, and I'd be doing that by reversing what's happened with stamp duty, encouraging them actually getting rid of stamp duty altogether, and say, right, come on, the sun is shining, I want you to go move house or whatever it is. I know times are tight, but for every one person who moves house or the flat or whatever it happens to be, the kitchen, the bathroom, and all the other bits and pieces get changed and money gets spent. It's a great multiplier of expenditure. So at a time when everyone else is worrying about where's the growth coming from, domestically, we could be expanding our economy by actually getting more domestic.
So very quickly, and time is very tight, just in terms of inflation and interest rates, what do we expect the Bank of England to do as a result of what we've seen?
Well, depending on how much inflation we're going to be seeing, is this inflation? Potentially it is inflationary. Do they have to put interest rates up? Certainly not. If I were them, I'd be putting interest rates down. May they delay that interest rate cut? That's quite possible, given what we know from the Bank of England at the moment. I'd be doing the opposite. I'd be saying, right, I'd be looking for cuts now to add to the other incentives to get the consumers moving that vital word back again into the economy. Confidence, please.
Absolutely. Justin, always such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. Justin Urquhart-Stewart there, economist. We have to take a break. So many messages coming in. I'm asking, are we seeing the first Brexit dividend? Your thoughts, please. 03444 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. This is Talk.
This is the rebirth, the revivification of nations acting as nations and not being beholden to globalist projects, one world of peace and harmony, which underneath is really an exercise in the accretion of power for those who aren't actually elected to public office. We want nations to be sovereign, and I think the deal that the UK received yesterday is a recognition of that.
The government has said today they are disappointed. They said there will be an economic impact. We're talking about thousands of jobs being lost.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I love this one from Brendan Silver. Good afternoon to you, Brendan, one of our regulars. David, it isn't the fact that this is the first Brexit dividend, it's the fact that this is the first Brexit dividend the government hasn't been able to deny. Love that. David, it's beyond belief that Starmer didn't use the Shagos deal as a bargaining chip to get free trade for the UK. Len in North Wales, thanks for that. This is Carl in Derbyshire. As a businessman, I think Donald Trump deplores tariffs, but I think he's strong-arming countries into eradicating them altogether. That's why I believe in all these new tariffs altogether. So that's really fascinating. As I said yesterday, he goes in high, doesn't he? Which is what he's done. And then the question is, where does he go from here? And it will be dependent on what the reciprocal countries do as a result. And I have a feeling the EU is about to overplay its hand. Let's talk to Simon in Basingstoke. Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon, David. I think Trump is doing that, and he is he is addressing a major issue that the US had a grand bargain with the world. We will provide you with defense, and we will allow our markets to be open. And that was only relevant during the Cold War. That ended 35 years ago. And Trump is addressing this. He's seen US industry hollowed out. And industry is important for national security, something that we're going to learn in the UK with the closing of our steel mills. So what Trump is doing is addressing that. And also, I would suggest everybody look at what the US 10-year bond is doing. That's fallen 11 basis points today. Trump is going to force countries and companies and banks to buy US debt, because that's the only way they're going to be able to obtain dollars for the vast and virtually unknown euro-dollar market. So the number of dollars out in the world, the vast majority of them are created into existence by banks that are producing loans in US dollars. And the supply of dollars is going to be constrained. So they will be forced to buy US debt, which will again reduce the debt costs in the United States.
So in your sort of feeling about this, Trump is obviously, I mean, it's protectionist, certainly. He says it's about making America wealthy again. I wonder how this is playing in the United States itself. What we did see when the markets opened at 8 and I was watching them, they all then dropped. But actually, the pound has strengthened as a result. How do you think we should respond in this country?
I think what we should try and do is we should be putting tariffs on other countries' goods, because if China's not going to sell the steel to the US, then they'll start to dump it in the UK. So that's one of the things we should do. And just to put this in context, look at the GDP of China and India in the year 2000. And compare it to the UK. The UK had a larger economy in 2000 than China and India. Now, China has a larger economy than us, and India has a larger economy than us, and China has the second largest economy in the world. Anyone who says globalization has been a benefit to Western countries is lying. So this is a rebalancing that, to be honest, should have been done 30 years ago. So that's what we should do. We should look at applying tariffs. And the only country that's ever built an industrial base without tariffs is the United Kingdom, when we had the first industrial revolution. Every other country in history has done it, from the United States to South Korea to Japan.
Simon, I have to jump in. Brilliant call. Thanks very much for your time this afternoon. After the break, we're talking more about tariffs and the rest of the political stories.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. 2 o'clock now, Thursday, April of the 3rd. Thanks very much for your company this afternoon. I'm David Bull, in for Ian Collins. Now, coming up this hour, Brexit has been hailed as the UK's saviour from the worst of Donald Trump's tariff blitz, saving thousands of jobs. But ministers call the 10% levy a disappointment as they consider retaliatory tariffs. Meanwhile, MPs will now have the chance to block Keir Starmer's Chagos Islands deal, with a vote on a bill needed to write the treaty into law, requiring approval from both the Commons and the Lords. And the architect of the assisted dying bill, this is Kim Leadbeater, rejected pleas from Labour MPs to delay the next vote, dismissing claims that her bill was rushed as utter nonsense. Some great talking points here. Do get in touch, please, and let me know your thoughts on all of those stories and more. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. Well, a very good afternoon to you. Depending on which paper you read, will depend on kind of the commentary you're getting. The Times says Trump piles on the tariffs. You've got Trump unleashes tariffs in the Daily Telegraph. But many of the papers are also saying we're seeing the first Brexit dividend. Of course, a wry smile, as I said when I woke up this morning, when I heard that, yes, we'd been hit with 10%, but the EU, my nemesis, has been hit with 20%, and they're not happy. So the question I'm asking this afternoon is, are we actually seeing the first dividend of Brexit? Many of you getting in touch. This is a really interesting message, actually. This is Cliff in Berkshire. Good morning, good morning, good afternoon. Great show, David, as always. We should rerun the I'm Backing Britain campaign. Do you remember that? And buy more and more British goods. Keep all of those messages coming in. David, you're right as usual. We are in a sweet spot to benefit from Brexit when the EU get involved on a trade war with the US. Sadly, Keir has shown his hand by already aligning with the EU, and as such is unlikely to take any action or inaction to benefit the United Kingdom that may actually offend his masters across the Channel. Just remember, he would rather be in Davos than Westminster. Mark in Selby, thank you for that. Joining me now, Robert Taylor, political commentator. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, David.
Are we seeing the first dividend of Brexit?
I'd say the second big dividend after the vaccine rollout, of course, during COVID, which everyone said was the first. So I would say this is the second big obvious one, along with obviously the supporting democracy, which a lot of EU countries didn't do after their people voted against a particular EU treaty. In our case with Brexit, our great and good were finally persuaded to let us Brexit, which is great. But in terms of since Brexit, I'd say this is the second big dividend.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we know Donald Trump has long hated the EU. He believes that it was set up to basically go up against the United States. In many senses, actually, it is the United States of Europe. In 2016, he said the bloc was created to beat the United States when it comes to making money. He called the EU later on, this is 2 years later in 2018, he said it was a foe on trade. I imagine revenge is a dish best served cold.
Well, I imagine so. I mean, he's always been very anti-EU for just the reasons you describe. And what he's really saying is, look, we in America, he's saying, are now doing to the EU what the EU has always done to America. In fact, if you believe Donald Trump, EU puts tariffs at around 39%. By the way, I'm not quite sure how Donald Trump had that up. And the Americans are going to say, no, we're just going to put 20% on the EU. So I'm not quite sure he adds up its figures, but it certainly does look like sweet revenge.
I wonder how this is playing in the United States. I mean, just in terms of the markets, I was saying that when I watched them at 8 o'clock this morning, they all sort of slid massively. And of course, then we saw sterling rise as a result. Just in terms of the American sentiment, essentially what he's doing is putting the American people first. He's incensed that no one seems to buy, or other countries don't seem to buy American cars. He doesn't understand why that is. And of course, these tariffs are going to impact, as I said, the likes of Jaguar, Land Rover. They're now trying desperately to work out how they open production facilities in the United States to avoid those tariffs. I'm also thinking of Johnny Walker Whiskey, for example, which will be hit. I mentioned AstraZeneca earlier and GSK earlier as well. There are other big businesses. Rolls-Royce, there's another one, for example. BAE Systems, another one. So actually the impact of this is far-reaching. The Labour government keeps saying, oh, we're almost there. We're almost there with this FTA. I don't believe them.
Well, I don't know whether they are nearly there or not. They've had quite some time now since Keir Starmer came in to sort out a free trade deal. They had what they would consider to be a very friendly president in Biden. Now they've got someone who doesn't quite align with them philosophically. Are they going to get a deal with him? Well, it will be in Britain's interest to do so. And let's remember that if we were in the EU, we would have no hope of negotiating a trade deal on our own. We'd have to go in with what the rest of the EU were doing. So at least we have that on our side.
Absolutely. And of course, Trump, I think you have to match Trump. And I think you need to tread very carefully. And as I said earlier, whilst the EU will go in with all guns blazing and then announce retaliatory tariffs, I think actually the smart money is on us not doing anything and actually sitting there and thinking, how do we reduce our own tariffs? Because that will bring Trump on side. We know Trump is an Anglophile.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, that is what the Starmer government is going to do. They started off well in the Oval Office about a month or so ago. That was a good meeting. I think many of us sort of patted Starmer on the back for that. And now he's got to follow through on that and say, well, if we really do have this soft, friendly relationship with Trump, we've got to reduce that 10% to getting down to zero. We can do it. We know he loves Britain. We know he just wants a fair deal. So let's get around the negotiating table and see what we can do.
Talking about Trump, Elon Musk, well, apparently he is going to step back from his role as a senior White House aide. This is according to Trump telling the inner circle. It's interesting, isn't it? Because, of course, he was brought in to do DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. My understanding was this is only a temporary role anyway. It's meant to end on the 4th of July. It looks, actually, that it will be expedited, partly because I think he's such a loose cannon. Trump clearly trusts Elon Musk, but there are lots of people in that administration who are not that happy.
Well, that is the point. So we're not sure now whether Musk is leaving because his 130-day contract is up. I would have thought that there would be a way around that. If Trump really wanted Musk to stay on, surely they can get around that contract. Or is it because Musk has upset people in the Trump administration with his rather aggressive handling of government? It could be a bit of both, but it does, for the moment, sound as though Musk is going back to commercial business.
Well, and also you have to bear in mind, £580 billion has been wiped off the value of US tech. Now, clearly, he owns all of those companies, including Tesla, and there are big problems. In fact, in Tesla, they're talking about trying to remove him as the CEO because, of course, people are having their cars vandalised and so on because of his affinity with Donald Trump. So it may be that actually he needs to go back and concentrate on the day job.
He might do. I mean, there are a few people in the world who can afford to lose $530 million and just say, oh, well, never mind, that's spare change. But I think Musk is one of them. But even for Musk, that's quite a big figure, and he must have that in the back of his mind as well. I think you're quite right there, David.
Let's talk about the Chagos Islands, because I was absolutely gobsmacked that Donald Trump had given that the rubber stamp and it had gone back to the Labour government. Now, we learnt that actually MPs now are going to get a chance to block Sir Keir Starmer's deal to give away the Chagos Islands. Apparently, a bill will now be brought forward to write the treaty into law once it's ratified. So essentially, it's got to go through the Commons, it's got to go through the Lords, and the various processes in between. How do you think this is going to play out? I mean, I think it's perfectly bonkers to give away something we already own. Then you're paying a huge amount of money to lease it back. It's strategically important, and we've only got a 99-year lease. I don't know who's in charge of this deal, but if I was a member of Parliament, I'd block it.
Well, I think I would be inclined to block it very much as well. But you've got to remember, Labour's got this huge majority. Are enough MPs going to go against the government on this carefully negotiated deal? It sounds very unlikely. It sounds obviously as though the Tories will go against it, but they've only got about 130 MPs. So all those Labour MPs are pretty much going to support this. What happens?
Do you think so? Or do you get a sense, I mean, this is what I saw, which I'm beginning to see discontent already within the Labour rank and file, because they can see that their constituencies are in peril. I think many of their constituents will be saying, look, I think most like-minded people will be saying this Chagos deal is a joke.
I think most people in the country would say, why are we paying Mauritius to take the Chagos Islands off our hands? It just doesn't make... And why Mauritius anyway? They're thousands of miles from the Chagos Islands. So I think a lot of people will have that. It's just a question of whether this is something that Labour MPs are prepared to rebel on. I somehow doubt it. I think it's too early in the Labour premiership, Starmer's premiership, for a lot of his own MPs to humiliate him in that way. I just can't see it happening. But we'll see.
We will see. Let's talk about Ed Miliband, shall we? My favourite character and the quest for net zero. There's a big article in the Times today. British households paid around £10 each on average on their energy bills last year to support a controversial wood-burning power station. This is all because of net zero. So here's how this works. So we, the taxpayer, gave them £869 million to Drax. This is a biomass facility. And essentially what we're doing is importing wood pellets, which seems absolutely bonkers. By the way, that's £2 million a day. We're importing the wood pellets. We're then burning it. They are saying, well, this is green because the trees absorb the carbon dioxide. It's absolute nonsense because the trees take years, if not decades, to absorb that amount of carbon dioxide. But this is all in the name of net zero.
Yeah, and apparently this is costing the British taxpayer as a whole, all of us, what was it, £869 million last year. I mean, we're throwing these millions and hundreds of millions around willy-nilly. Why are we doing this? And even Green campaigners are worried about Drax and saying this company isn't as green as perhaps Ed Miliband and others in government think it is. So what we're seeing here is an alliance between Green campaigners on the one hand and those probably like you and me, David, who are just worried about the public purse on the other. It's this alliance. And we have to say to the government, why on earth are you spending all this money on this company?
But also the government keeps saying, Ed Miliband keeps saying, if you remember back, our energy bills will come down. You will be £300 better off every single year. That was a total lie. We are now paying more money than ever before for our energy bills. The energy price cap has gone up and there are no answers from government. And of course, we're now seeing more offshore wind farms being put in. There's a huge debate raging what's going to happen in terms of pylons over Kent, East Anglia as well, and people are really furious.
Indeed, just as Starmer said that the council taxes will be frozen, well, they've shot up yesterday. Same with energy bills. It'll go down by 300 quid a year for the average taxpayer by 2030. Well, no sign of that happening at all. And it's no wonder if we're spending £860 million a year on a company called Drax.
And of course, we can't afford to actually keep the heating on for elderly people at the same time. Let's just talk about some breaking news. Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander has said she has approved Luton Airport's expansion plan. This is another not net zero plan, despite the planning inspectorate recommending she reject it over environmental concerns. This is the major dichotomy in government, isn't it? So you've got Ed Miliband and his merry band who are pushing net zero. Then you've got the practicalities of trying to grow the economy. We should have invested in airports a long time ago, and we've been left in this ridiculous position where a transformer goes out, plunges Heathrow into darkness, and of course the country descends into abject chaos.
Well, absolutely. And the trouble is, Ed Miliband is apparently the most popular Labour minister among Labour Party members. So it's very difficult to just get rid of him. And of course, for Labour Party members, they're all into this net zero stuff. But the Prime Minister belatedly, and Rachel Reeves belatedly, is now beginning to realise that if we pursue all this net zero stuff, the economy is going to continue flatlining at best. So they have to approve Luton, they have to approve Heathrow, they have to approve a second runway at Gatwick. What does that mean for Ed Miliband? Well, maybe we'll hear from him in the coming days and weeks.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I don't know what you do. How do you solve a problem like Ed Miliband? What does Starmer do? Because, of course, the tension, as you say, between the Treasury and net zero is huge.
Well, it is. I mean, I wrote about this last week. We got rid of Just Stop Oil. Apparently, they're now going to desist from their campaign of direct action, which costs so much money and trauma for us all. Well, how about just stop Miliband? That's what we really need. We need Ed to either see the light or be shot back to the backbenchers.
Really good to talk to you. Thanks, Robert. Really good. Robert Taylor there, political commentator. Lots of messages coming in. This is Deanne. Good afternoon to you. Good afternoon, David. Lovely to see your face on a midweek afternoon programme. Thank you. I love your common sense approach to the things that people care about. Keep up the good work, David. Thank you. David, this is Howard in sunny Suffolk, my county. Seems clear that the EU will retaliate with tariffs on USA imports. But the worst part is I just know Starmer will follow and he will retaliate in lockstep with the EU. I'm not quite so sure. I do agree with his pragmatic view at the moment, but we will see. David, this is John Ross. People do not buy American cars, most likely because there are better cars to buy. The UK government decides we should buy EVs. The US government decides we should buy more American cars. Where does it stop? No choice, you see. David, I still go to the barbers. What? I still go to... Oh, I've lost that now. I still go to the barbers. My dad took me 54 years ago, as it was the closest. So did mine, actually. Now I drive the 1 mile past 8 barber shops to get to mine. And as you say, hardly a client in sight, but nice Mercedes and BMWs outside. But that is small potatoes. The big boys have moved on to cosmetic dentistry, where a false treatment can be billed at £50,000. Keep those messages coming in, please. Are we seeing the first Brexit dividend? Or the second there, as Robert said. Of course, the first was the fact we decoupled from the EU and that allowed the COVID vaccine rollout much faster than the rest of Europe. And if you remember, they were very cross about that at the time. And now they're very cross because they have double the tariffs that we have in the United Kingdom. So are we seeing the second Brexit dividend? 0344 499 1000. After the break, your turn, your calls, your thoughts, your messages. This is Talk.
Brits get a B and you're complaining that you only got a B grade while everybody else gets a D.
We're among 60 countries. You got the D grade.
Why can't you celebrate the fact that it's only 10% and that you can negotiate your way out of it if you take certain measures?
OK, give us some advice. What can we pass on to Keir Starmer?
I think the logic for all nations is clear. don't penalize our products, then you won't have punitive tariffs. It's really that easy. It's nothing more complicated. The mathematics are very simple.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk. Lots of messages. Trump, David. This is Stephen, East Yorkshire. Good afternoon. Trump knows what he is doing and has a plan. He's surrounded and advised by top economists and businessmen, whilst we have Starmer, Reeves, the OBR, and no plan. Very droll. Good afternoon, David. The tariffs are hardly a Brexit benefit when Northern Ireland could face being economically destroyed if the EU retaliates. Well, this is the fault of that blinking deal, isn't it? The fact is that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, and we should never have agreed to what we did and put a border in the Irish Sea, but don't start me on all of that. The tariffs are hardly a Brexit benefit when Northern Ireland could face being economically destroyed if the EU retaliates. Anything related to that and the Tories, they actually allowed it to happen. If we already put 10% tariff on the USA, how is it wrong for them to put the same on the United Kingdom? I really don't understand, Sandy. Thank you for that. David. This is David in Dorchester. In Canada, there's now a website that lists US products that are imported there with the Canadian equivalent products. We need to have something similar. That's a brilliant idea. So the general public can vote with their feet. So you see an item, it's American made, and you decide, well, actually, I'm going to buy British instead. That was what Brendan Silver said earlier on. Lots of other messages coming in as well. Keep all of those coming in. Are we actually seeing the second Brexit dividend? 0344 499 1000. Let's take some calls now. Matt is on the line from Cheshire. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, David. Since for maybe 2 decades, mainly the Democrats have allowed good blue-collar jobs, opportunities, and the standard of living to go down in America, and by doing so emboldening China and help building up China's economy to the stage we're at now. All Trump is doing is reversing that and bringing back jobs to America that people had in the 80s and 90s, which was basically the basis of the American dream. In this country, the people that are slagging him off are doing exactly the same thing to the British public now. They're running down our standard of living, and they're basically destroying industry or what's left of it with the net zero zealotry.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And actually, when you look at the small print of this, and I did some digging this morning, so I mentioned this earlier, Britain taxes US cars at 10%, America taxes us at 2.5%, so that isn't fair, so that's not parity, so I understand that. Now, also, when you look at chicken, America charges £68 on every 1,000 kilos of imported chicken. We charge £135.57. I understand Donald Trump saying, well, this is highly unfair, and in fact, we weren't really in the firing line. Now, just in terms of middle America, and remember that that is Trump's base, right in the middle of America. Those people who are less affluent, particularly swarming to Trump, the bi-coastal regions tend to be far more democratic. I think this is going to play very well for Trump in those areas.
I agree completely. Unlike anything we've ever seen in the last 20 years, he's actually doing what people voted for, something we've become completely unaccustomed to in Britain in the last 20 years. And people can't cope with it. Everyone's triggered yet again. We're seeing all the childish, pathetic behaviour from the Lib Dems and Labour. And good luck to him. Maybe one day we'll have a politician with a spine in charge of this country.
Brilliant point. Well made, Matt. Thank you for your call. Let's talk to Cindy, who's in Michigan, who's one of our regulars. Good afternoon, Cindy.
Hi, David. It's nice to see you on a weekday.
Well, you know how it is.
I saw you and I was like right on.
Good. So tell me what's going on in Michigan. Donald Trump, look, in many ways, he is supporting the American economy. He's going to make America wealthy again. He's going to make America great again. How is that playing?
Well, it's playing out really well. I live in Pigeon, Michigan, okay? And I live in an area, I'm really fortunate that we're all Trump supporters. So we love him. But there's this the history media, like all the media that you see, is really fake news. They give you half of the story. All Trump is doing is reciprocal tariffs. So, you know, what you're doing, he's just doing it.
You see, the thing is, I'm not entirely sure that is true. I want to know, why has Cambodia got a 49% tariff, South Africa 30%? Some of these don't make much sense. I get the China thing, I get the EU, totally get that, and I get the United Kingdom, but also he's exempted the UAE, Saudi, Colombia, Argentina, El Salvador. They get 10%. So I don't know quite how they've worked this out.
He's got a team of really good people. So that's why a lot of us really, like half of America supports Trump, and the straight other half they're beyond. The Democrats are beyond disliking Trump. They hate him and everything he does or tries to do. It's ridiculous. And the news that you see, that's why I watch talkTV a lot. I watch it all the time.
Very sensible.
Because you give us all the news, the whole story, not just the side of the story that you're on. You give the whole side. And if I turn on regular news, it's all against Trump.
But that's also because the news outlets in the States are based in New York, aren't they? So therefore you've got a very skewed population, rather like actually in London is a very skewed population when you compare it with the rest of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, there is one good news station. It's that I watch. I forgot the name of it though. But
it's that good.
Newsmax. Sorry, it's called Newsmax.
Right.
Newsmax in America. And they're wonderful. They give the whole story, and they actually just got on the stock market. They and their stock is just totally went up, like by, I don't know, they said like 700% or 800%. So they just got available on the stock market. So people who invested in them were really happy.
Yeah,
they're doing a good job.
So can I just ask you, were you surprised that the United Kingdom was separated from the European Union so that the tariffs imposed for us are half what was imposed on the EU? You weren't surprised?
No, not at all. Not at all. Trump loves the UK. America loves the UK, and Trump is not so fond of the EU. I mean, let's just face it. And I'm not fond of them. I'm not fond of what they're doing. I'm not fond of their politics. I can't believe even Keir Starmer, and he just not. It'll be better if he doesn't play hardball with Trump, because he's going to ruin things. And I think that Keir Starmer is very sneaky. I hate what he's done to freeze the elderly people. I hate that. And yet he's taking tickets to see, you know, things. And he's not hearing what the people are asking for. He's doing what his small captured ideology people, you know, are wanting. He's hearing them, but he's not hearing the mass of the people. And I hope that there's not some kind of I hope that everybody stays calm and doesn't like riot or anything like that. But Keir Starmer is kind of asking for it in a way, because people don't feel heard.
Well, to be fair to Starmer, he has said, right, we need to be calm and considered. Keep calm, carry on, which is very British in itself, and then we will think carefully about what we're doing. So I think that is the right thing. The Europeans, of course, probably going to be a little more hot-headed, our European friends and allies. Really good to talk to you, Cindy, as always. Thanks very much for your call. Andy, this is a great message in Cornwall. David, all these people saying, let's buy British. Where has the money been going for the past years? They should have been British first, always. David, you can't buy British, says Tim, because we don't make anything. Let's reinvent British steel. Quite. Well, stop selling off the blast furnaces and having electric furnaces, which are ridiculous. Let's reinvent British steel. Quite a bit of Trump's foods are banned in the UK due to additives, indeed, including chlorinated chicken. David, the UK not buying American cars. Is Tesla not American? That's Keith in Somerset. And Ian Stevens, one more. Superb outing, David, thank you. Love what you did with the Sound of Miliband. How do you solve a problem like net zero? A flibbity-gibbet, a will-o'-the-wisp, a clown. He is the embodiment of all three. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Carl from up north. It's actually the third benefit of Brexit, as we were first with the vaccine, David. I know. So it doesn't make it two. What's the other one that you're talking about? Let me know. Labour must be fuming. This is Mark in London. Trump's tariff at 10%. They were hoping for 25% so they could push us back into the EU. Great point. People do not buy American cars, most likely because there are better cars to buy. Lots of you saying the same thing there as well. David, there is a lot of crowing. This is Nikki in Kent from Brexit Types, that the UK is in a better position than the EU versus the States. However, the EU is a major trading partner for the United States, and the tariffs imposed by the EU can have a broad impact on American businesses. For example, when the EU retaliated against Trump's steel and aluminium tariffs in 2018, it targeted key US exports like bourbon, motorcycles, agricultural products, which hurt specific American industries. It's true the UK on its own would struggle to make the same level of impact. Let's talk about something completely different now. I want to talk about assisted dying, which I feel very passionately about. The architect of the assisted dying bill has rejected pleas to delay the next vote from Labour MPs who fear that actually it will harm their electoral prospects. This is because it's actually happening on April the 25th. That's just days before the local mayoral elections and, of course, the by-election that is taking place as well on May the 1st. So Kim Leadbeater, she is the Labour MP who is trying to change the law here, said it was utter nonsense to claim her bill had been rushed. That's what they're saying to her. We've rushed the bill. We can't possibly cope. We haven't got the safeguards in place and so on. She says that actually it has been more closely scrutinised than any other piece of legislation. So there are lots of changes that have happened to this bill in the passage through the House of Commons and the committee stage and so on. She set out a series of changes that have been made during line-by-line scrutiny of that bill, including banning doctors from raising assisted dying without discussing other options, also requiring them to have training on mental capacity, more oversight of how the law affects the disabled, and also delaying the new law coming into force for up to 4 years. Joining me now is Tom Hunt, who is the former Tory Member of Parliament who is campaigning against the assisted suicide bill. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
I know you're vehemently opposed to the bill. Why?
Because I think it puts vulnerable people at risk. I think if you look at wherever it's been introduced around the world, there's been no perfect bill, and we've seen sadly a number of vulnerable people being often coerced into premature deaths. And I think when we look at this bill in particular, there was an opportunity to strengthen the bill after second reading. I think that opportunity has been rejected. I think that the High Court safeguard, which was trumpeted at second reading by Kimberly Bitter as being one of the key safeguards, and actually over 60 MPs cited the High Court safeguard specifically as being a reason why they voted for it at second reading. That's actually been stripped out now.
It has, that's right. Well, they've removed the High Court, haven't they? The High Court judge, and they've replaced it with a panel of experts, lawyers, social workers, psychiatrists.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, the judicial element will not be present in most of the individual decisions. It was the case at second reading that a High Court judge would have to sign off on each individual application. Under the new proposal for panels, more often than not, the legal figure on the panel will not be a judge. And moreover, they will not have to meet in person with the applicant. There won't have to be no obligation to question the applicant. And moreover, in exceptional circumstances, those exceptional circumstances have not been defined, they won't have to have any communication with the applicant whatsoever. So let me be really clear here. These panels that have replaced the High Court safeguard, there are certain circumstances where they'll be rubber stamping applications for an assisted death without having had any communication whatsoever with the applicant. So how can we say that they're in any kind of position to detect coercion, to make sure that this is actually their own individual choice? For me, this bill has got weaker throughout the course of the committee. Over 330 amendments that were tabled by MPs who voted against the second reading, wanted to increase safeguards, were not accepted by Kimberly Bitter at the committee stage. This is a weaker bill. It puts vulnerable people at risk. And I hope and believe it will be rejected at third reading.
Well, I was about to say, so if the members of Parliament believe that, in the same vein that you do, that actually it's been watered down and the safeguards aren't there, then clearly they should vote against it, shouldn't they?
Yeah, that's my view. And I'll also be clear here. There's a difference between being pro-assisted dying in a principle sense.
Yes. So where do you stand in terms of being in principle?
Personally, I would struggle, because when I look around the world, there hasn't been a single where it's been introduced, so there haven't been major issues. So at that point, the question does begin to be posed, is there a way of doing this in a safe way that doesn't put vulnerable people at risk? And particularly when you look at Canada, but also Oregon, when you look at the Netherlands, there have been some horror stories. Anorexic people qualifying for a young woman with anorexia qualifying for an assisted death. In Canada, we have people opting for it because often disabled people are not getting the support they need. So for me, I think when I look around the world, there hasn't been a single place who have tried to introduce it that have done so in a safe way. However, when it comes to that vote at third reading, we're not voting on a vague principle. We're voting on the specifics of a lead-beater bill that, in my view, puts a lot of vulnerable people at risk. But, I'm talking to a lot of MPs and other people who are pro the principle, but they're not comfortable with this particular bill. And that is the bill they're voting on. They're not voting, this is not a sort of debate exercise where we're voting on a vague principle and some imaginary bill that doesn't exist. We're voting on the Kimberly Bitter bill that rejected a Down syndrome amendment supported by Down syndrome charities that wanted to put specific protections for those with Down syndrome on the face of the bill. That amendment was not accepted.
Yep.
We had try and protect anorexic people. That amendment was not accepted. We had an amendment to try and protect those with autism. That was not accepted. This is being it feels at times like this is being railroaded through Parliament. The bill itself was only published weeks before second reading. No impact assessment. There hasn't been a government impact assessment yet. We don't know what the knock-on cost is going to be on the NHS. And now we've got this 4-year delay because the government thought it was not possible to deliver it within 2 years.
Oh, look, I completely understand the issues over safeguarding, but as someone who has worked with people who are terminally ill, my real concern is that when people, and I've been in this position, when people are pleading with you to take them out of their misery, then we as clinicians can do nothing about that. And I'm also really mindful of those people who have to leave this country to go to Dignitas, to die in a very clinical, sterile room without their family around them, for example. That troubles me enormously.
Well, yeah, I mean, and actually there was a story about somebody who went to Switzerland, I think last week. It was a BBC News story. And I think it was a lady, I think she was 51 in her early 50s, and her son had died previously, and she became depressed because her son had died. From what I understand, she had no serious physical health issues. She was just depressed because of this terrible thing had happened, which is understandable. And she went to Switzerland, and this took place, this assisted death took place, with no one in her family knowing. And they found out after it had happened. So they had not had an opportunity to try and speak to their loved one, to try and give them the mental support they need to get them through this difficult time. And I think that is wrong. And there are opportunities throughout the committee process with this particular bill to increase the extent to which family members should be informed about one of these pending decisions, and those amendments weren't accepted. So, I mean, in terms of all of this is difficult because death is very difficult, and palliative care works for many people. It doesn't work for everyone. So I think that palliative care. There's many people in this country who are not getting the first-rate palliative care they deserve. There's more that can be done there in terms of funding. I remember when I was an MP being, I didn't have a medical background. I remember going to our hospice, and I kind of thought, it was funded in the same way as, I thought hospices were funded in the same way as hospitals. No. And I found out 60% of their income was fund runs and things like that, which is, I really applaud those people fundraising, good for them. But, I always thought it was sort of like a top-up income. I didn't think it was their primary income. But there's nothing that matters more about how we care for people at the end of their lives. I think this has started that discussion, that debate. But I think this bill, as it stands before us right now, and will stand before MPs at third reading, I think it has too many holes. And for me, I'm very much of the view that if this bill is formed in anything like its current form, significant numbers of vulnerable people will end up being coerced into premature deaths. And for me, that's far too high a price to pay.
And just in terms of the timing, April the 25th, we talked about the local mayoral, the by-election taking place on the 1st of May. Many of those members of Parliament may not be present because they'll be out campaigning.
Yeah, I understand that decision for Kim, I believe, and I think from the interview she gave yesterday, I think she made it clear that she wasn't for budging on the 25th of April. What I'd say is I remember being newly elected as an MP and at the first council elections in my constituency after I was elected as the MP, and I wanted to be there. I wanted to help out the council candidates. But ultimately, though, you are elected to Parliament to vote on these sorts of things. You are elected as a member of Parliament to do your job and to be in the House of Commons. To these issues. There are not many more important issues than this issue. So I would, whilst sympathetic to some of the concerns raised, I would also say that really MPs need to be in the House of Commons that Friday. It's just one afternoon, and frankly, their constituents count on it. Because this debate needs to happen in the right way. It needs high turnout. This is a life and death issue. There are many more important issues they're going to vote on in the time of they're an MP. So some sympathy. Ultimately, the lady's not for turning when it comes to the 25th of April.
And it is your job, as you say.
Yeah.
It is your job. I know it's incredibly emotive, and I feel very passionately about it. And of course, I understand your issues about safeguarding and so on. And I think they're all really valid because we have to get this right. We absolutely have to get this right. And I think also once you've got that template, it also takes the pressure off the physicians. And without going into too much detail, for those people who are terminally ill, there is also this sort of trade-off, isn't there? The way that we administer analgesia, there are side effects to that analgesia, and of course you titrate according to pain. It is very complicated. Let's just talk very quickly. I know you're a Brexiteer. Let's just talk about the tariffs and Donald Trump. Are we seeing the second Brexit dividend here? The United Kingdom spared those whopping tariffs that have been imposed on the European Union?
I think the simple fact is that if we were a member of the EU right now, we'd be paying huge amounts of additional money than we're paying at the moment of a 10% tariff. So, I was somebody who voted in campaign for Brexit pretty avidly because I thought these were sort of benefits that would happen, and it's happened. I guess as somebody who was very nervous about the current government, if given half an opportunity, edging us towards the EU again, I guess maybe this is beneficial. But ultimately, I think it is a Brexit benefit, like the vaccines was a Brexit benefit. We got lots of benefits from leaving the EU, and one of those benefits was meant to be our ability to control our own borders.
Enough
and
said
maybe
on
one
that.
day that might happen.
Well, maybe one day, but there again, the Conservative Party isn't exactly blameless in that. Tom, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Tom Hunt there, former Conservative MP who is campaigning against the assisted suicide bill. Your thoughts, please, on assisted dying. This is Joanna in Salisbury. Assisted dying, David, it started off so well, then watered down so much it is now very similar to the Canadian version that none of us actually wanted. It will be abused like this. I totally get that. That there have been amendments made to all of this. The biggest one being the High Court judges removed, replaced by a panel of experts. These are lawyers, social workers, psychiatrists. Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, also said it will clog up the courts. But for me, also, if you then make sure there's enough protection in it, it is also really important for people who are terminally ill, however you define that criteria, that they are in control of their own death. And I've mentioned this before, that I was taught by a brilliant palliative care doctor who said we have a great birth, we spend a lot of time making sure the birth of our child, it's all done in the best way possible, and we should be also able to have a great death. Let's take a break. After the break, please get in touch. Your calls, thoughts and messages. This is Talk.
Why has the National Crime Agency suddenly worked out that what everybody else knew is something that they've discovered?
How on earth can they be taking such a long time to wake up to what everyone else has known when they find 6 barbershops on their high street next door to each other with only 6 customers a week?
Right. And a large Mercedes parked outside, usually.
Yeah, when we broke this story, the Daily Mail, we found a street with 22 barbershops, some just lined up literally like soldiers next to each other.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Lots of you getting in touch about assisted dying. I know it's a really difficult conversation. Steve Brown, David, thank you for discussing assisted dying. It's so important that we have the choice. I know it's not for everyone, but as a funeral professional for many years, I've seen so many families actually torn apart from having to watch a loved one go through a painful and undignified end. I agree. Choice, choice, choice. It's all about choice. I would take it in a heartbeat, but I also know others who wouldn't, but we must have the choice. Great show as always, thank you. I agree totally. Having witnessed people who have died in terrible pain and agony, and they've sat there pleading with me to stop their pain and suffering, I just question what we're doing. We certainly wouldn't allow animals to die like that. And so therefore I think the choice thing is absolutely paramount. Pamela says, hi David, who is Tom Hunt to play God? Obviously he has no life experience regarding suffering. He needs to accept that death is part of life and should not be brushed under the carpet. Cliff in Berkshire. David, assisted dying is a real minefield at a time when we give women a godlike power to decide whether an unborn baby lives or dies. Why can't we give everyone, whether terminally ill or not, the right to die? Is being alive always the best choice? David is on the line from London. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, David. David, as an ex-UKIP chairman of London, one of the boroughs, this dividend we've got, I think it's absolutely fantastic. The dividend from Mr. Trump, I think it's the first real, although we could argue about vaccinations, I'm loving it. They cannot take it away. The civil servants couldn't block it. They can't take it away, David. I'm waiting for you to get Mr. Heseltine on.
Well, I mean, look, if it had been the other way round, and if we'd been lumbered with 20% and the EU got 10%, we'd never hear the end of it.
Absolutely, and also I'm sitting out in the garden at the moment, David, just thinking what a wonderful day for a cruise across the channel.
Right, what are you saying there?
Apparently, I'm going over there in about a month's time. Apparently there are absolutely thousands and thousands and thousands just on the coast, right along Dunkirk, along, just waiting. And what a beautiful day to come across.
Well, it's a really good point, actually. We looked at the figures yesterday. There were no crossings yesterday at all, and yet it was sunny. It was windy, so I wonder if the tides were rough.
Well, perhaps Border Force couldn't get in there to pick them up.
Well, maybe not, or maybe the French are actually doing something for a change.
As I keep saying to people, there's no such thing as small boats. I've not seen anybody coming in on a small boat. I've seen plenty coming in on a border crossing, just waiting to pick them up.
Yeah. Really good to talk to you. Thank you, David. Enjoy the sunshine in your garden. Chris is on the line from Epsom. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, David.
What's on your mind?
Talk to you again. Where do I start? Well, first of all, we haven't got 10% tariffs from America today. We already had 6%, so he's only put 4% on.
It depends on the goods, as far as I'm concerned. But yes, I take the point.
Yeah, and it's not absolutely sure yet whether he's going to put the 25% on our car manufacturing or not yet.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because actually, we expected this. He goes in high. He's a businessman. The question is how we respond. I think that is the crux of this.
That this is not the time to start, as that idiot liar, not a solicitor, John Reynolds said. The time now is to sit back, stay quiet, see what everybody else does, because let them start the...
Yes, let them make the first move.
Yes, and we can go and talk to him, because the EU is going to throw tariffs at him. Let him find out who his friends are, all right? We don't need to be Latin sabres. There's nothing horrendous that he said about our trade with him. The EU has been putting 39% on all American goods. He's only put 20% on. They're still 20% up on the deal, or 19% up. I mean, it makes me laugh. It really does. I mean, not only has half of or three-quarters of the world relied on American security and being the big policeman of the world, they've absolutely sucked the lifeblood out of America with tariffs. If you look at what was going on with China, the Far East, Turkey, Europe, I mean, I don't blame him for doing what he's done. Now, we haven't been like that with him, especially now with Brexit. The time now is to hold your water and go and talk to him after everybody else has kicked off.
I mean, you mentioned Jonathan Reynolds there. He says, well, he's going to canvass opinion from businesses and decide what they think is best. Hang on a minute. This is not for them to decide. This is for government to decide, isn't it?
This is absolutely right, David. This is a government tool, but it's just the same as Reeves from accounts, all right? Going to the watchdog to find out what she needs to do to create growth. He's got to go to people, business people, to find out what a government should be doing with a government tool, because he hasn't got a bloody clue.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. There's a great article in the Telegraph, actually, today saying Rachel Reeves may have a degree in economics, but she ought to sit in an A-level class and actually learn the same subject. Has she heard of the Laffer curve? The fact is she's taxing everyone so much that people are leaving the country that actually her receipts are going to go down as a result of that. And then she thinks that the answer is to tax people even more. Well, it isn't, is it?
David, I tell you, you're absolutely right. And the other thing is, I've got two other things to say, and different things. On taxation, she's lost her fiscal headroom if she ever built it.
She has, yeah.
She's going to come back, but she cannot tax, as they call it, working people. Because what they mean by working people is the public sector. 51% of the country now depend on the state. We're almost into complete Marxist communism here. They can't tax working people anymore. So what she'll do, she'll come after ISAs and savings.
Yeah.
Or she might make an even bigger mistake and go after the wealth of the people that haven't bailed out of the country. Because I can tell you now, people are exiting left, right, and I talk to a lot of people.
Well, we lost 10,800 millionaires last year, 157% more than the year before, and second only to China.
Yeah, I know, and I heard you talking about the 1% paying 30% earlier.
25%, yeah.
Now, the other thing I want to mention is barbers.
Yes.
Now, I'm getting on in age now. I'm 64.
That's young.
But when we moved to Leafy, Surrey, 54 years ago, my father took me to a barber's down the road. It's 1 mile down the road. And I remember they used to have to put a board across the seat on the arms because I wasn't big enough to sit in the chair. I still go to the same place now. It's new ownership, but the guy that's owned it now has had it for 30 years. I now drive past 8 new barber shops on that 1 mile drive, and there's a new one opening. So there'll be 9 in 1 mile, where he used to be the closest to us.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mentioned this on Friday at a particular event I did, and the fact is I never see anyone in them. And you're right that they're all empty, and clearly suddenly the police are coming on, and I welcome that actually, but it is a little bit late.
It's a bit late because the big boys have moved on. You know what they're into now?
Car washes? No?
No.
Candy?
No, far better than that. Cosmetic dentistry labs.
Yes, so someone else said actually. I didn't know that.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, I'm actually sitting talking to you with what they call turkey teeth.
Oh, very nice. Very white ones. Are they realistic?
No, I didn't do the violence.
Oh, you didn't? OK.
No, I went natural. Thank you very much. Jesus wept.
Well, I don't know. You might have been watching Towie or something.
I'm frightening enough without brilliant white teeth as well. But I went to a decent dentist in Turkey because over here, my normal dentist, I asked him to look, because I had broken teeth and smoked and drank red wine and black coffee. They didn't look nice. I didn't like smiling for photographs, so I asked him how much to get them done.
Yeah, and what was the price?
He quoted me £36,000 plus.
And how much in Turkey?
6.5.
Wow, but of course, you see, we do see people coming back from Turkey where it hasn't gone quite so well, and of course then you have to pay for the treatment to be reversed. Time is tight. Thank you so much for your call, though, Chris. Always good to talk to you. Right, time for a break. Now, after the break, we're going to be talking about physician associates. Doctors expose the scale of physician associates' failures. There are hair-raising examples of things that have gone wrong in the NHS. That's next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, very good afternoon. 3 o'clock now on Thursday, April the 3rd. I'm David Bull, in for Ian Collins. A very good afternoon, and thank you for your company this afternoon. Now, coming up in the next hour, Brexit has been hailed as the UK saviour from the worst of Donald Trump's tariff blitz, saving thousands of jobs. But ministers call the 10% levy a disappointment as they consider retaliatory tariffs. Meanwhile, doctors have exposed the scale of physician associate failures. This is in a new report detailing more than 600 examples where patient safety was put at risk or serious harm caused. And are we too polite for our own good? There's new research out showing that Brits use polite phrases to hide frustration or avoid conflict, often meaning the complete opposite of what we say. You can call us, you can leave a voice note, the number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. Well, a very good afternoon to you. We're talking about the tariffs. Of course, Donald Trump's tariffs make America wealthy again. The EU hit with 20%. We were hit with 10%. The government says, well, we're finalising the FTA. Your thoughts, please. Is this the second Brexit dividend that we are seeing? It's very interesting, actually. The government, the people who want us to rejoin the EU, simply have nowhere to run with this, which is amusing me somewhat. Let me know your thoughts on that. Please. Also on assisted dying, lots of you talking about that, and about America generally, just very quickly. Good afternoon, David. Most of American food is banned in the EU. I'm not sure that's true due to all of the chemicals, but when the UK left the EU, they lifted the ban on a lot of different things from America. I am a Brexit supporter, but I do like the stance of the EU regarding chemicals in foods and the use of GMO products. Obviously, this is all up for grabs if there is a deal to be done. Also, hi, David, your American friend is bang on. That's Cindy in Michigan. She is bang on. Starmer has no idea of the pulse of the majority. Thanks, Paul in Suffolk. You are right, Paul. G says Ford is American. I know. David, there is a lot of crowing from Brexit types that the UK is in a better position than the EU. There certainly is. Keep all of those messages coming in. I want to talk about something now which is completely different. This is about the role of physician associates. It's something that many of my friends have phoned me about. Many of my friends are doctors. The idea being that a physician associate has been brought in to lighten the load that doctors have to do. However, there are real concerns about what these physician associates are doing, and they are overreaching what they are meant to be doing. Now, the British Medical Association has compiled a report detailing more than 600 examples of physician associates putting patient safety at risk or causing serious harm. This is the largest study, actually, about physician associates and anaesthetist associates working in the NHS. These are unbelievable examples of the associates. They've misdiagnosed cancer, they have impersonated doctors, they have illegally prescribed medication, they've ordered scans, which they're not allowed to do, by the way. And of course, if you remember, the previous government wanted to go from the physician associate numbers going up to 10,000 in 15 years. And I want to talk more about this review by Professor Gillian Leng, President of the Royal Society of Medicine. Let me just give you two other cases. In one case, a 6-centimetre cancerous tumour, that's about the size of an egg, was missed by a physician associate who did a cervical examination and missed it. The lady had come in with postmenopausal bleeding, so an investigation and examination was done. They missed the tumour. The physician associates also carried out or attempted to carry out a chest drain, which is where you put a great big tube into your chest to drain fluid, and that went badly wrong. Joining me now, Richard Marks, co-director of Anaesthetists United. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Really good to talk to you. Loads of my friends who are consultants are very, very worried about what is going on. Can you tell us more?
So, like you say, physician associates were originally introduced to be assistants for doctors, and over the years since they've been around, they've been replacing doctors. They've been doing things autonomously without supervision, and we're seeing problems.
And so, sorry, just in terms of their remit, just tell us what they are meant to do.
So they're meant to be assistants to doctors. But the whole area of what they should and shouldn't be doing has been glossed over. Earlier this year, the General Medical Council started to regulate them, and everyone assumed that regulation would mean what it says on the tin, that they would set clear rules for what they can and can't do. But in fact, they haven't done that. What they've said is, we'll leave it up to the employer. And employers are going to be strapped for cash and desperate to get things through. So no one has taken overall, there's no national rules for what these people can and cannot do.
It's extraordinary. So, as you say, the GMC actually started regulating them in December. Mandatory registration and legal enforcement doesn't come until December of next year.
Yeah, that's right. There's a 2-year... Which was, to be fair to the GMC, was set by Parliament, but there's a 2-year sort of transition period where they have to get registered.
Just in terms of what they are doing, I was just reading some of these examples. They're ordering X-rays and CT scans. They were pretending they were doctors with the knowledge of the supervising consultant.
There's lots of examples that you can see in that report, but I think, to me, the most frightening, really, is that they are seeing patients who present without a diagnosis in A&E and in general practice. And that's where you see the mistakes happening, really. That once a patient has been diagnosed and has a sort of plan that you're going to go down, then I think that it can safely be delegated. But the difficult decision is right at the beginning, where you decide what this patient is.
And as you say, if the physician associate is the person who's making that initial diagnosis, you then start going down a treatment pathway. If that diagnosis is wrong because you are not qualified to give that diagnosis, then the treatment plan is wrong.
That's the problem. That's the problem. And what we've also seen is that they're making these decisions and these diagnoses without referring it up to the doctor.
So I was talking to a friend of mine. I can't mention the hospital because for legal reasons, but he was saying they are laying off specialist consultants, bringing in more physician associates because they're much cheaper, and as a result, patient safety is being compromised.
We see that even more at a training level, that they're cutting the number of doctors in training so that they can divert money to training more PAs and AAs.
And for people listening, what sort of training do physician associates actually get?
So they have to have some sort of undergraduate course, and there's some variation in what that can or can't be. And then they do a 2 years course, a 2 years master's, and then that's it. When you compare that with medicine, first of all, it's a longer training in medicine, but also at the end of training, that's not it. In medicine, you have a year of pre-registration. You then have a period where you're training in a particular subject to get onto what's called the specialist register or the GP register, which is where you're able to go out and become a consultant.
And so the NHS says, well, physician associates are trained practitioners that support the NHS to provide quality care for patients. They have clear instructions from the health service. They are not to be used as substitutes for doctors, and they must work under appropriate supervision. But something is clearly going wrong. I was just reading this case of someone who was diagnosed with 40 melanomas, skin cancers. And when he obviously, that went down very badly. He thought his life was over. He was then seen by a dermatologist. The dermatologist said, no, you don't have a melanoma at all. That's unacceptable.
I mean, I think the key word here is appropriate supervision, that word is not properly defined. And as you know, the group that I'm part of, Anaesthetist United, we're seeking a legal case over this. In fact, is going to court in just over a month's time.
And tell us more about the case.
So what the case is about is just this. The technical name for it is scope of practice, but it's about what PAs can and cannot do. And we're saying there has to be a national guideline relative to for each specialty and for each grade, which can change with time. And as PAs get more senior, they can take on more things. But there have to be clear guidance on what they can and can't do, and that just hasn't happened.
Can I just ask you about the NHS generally? We spoke about it yesterday actually, we're seeing record amounts of money going into the NHS and actually satisfaction dropping across the board in the NHS. What are your thoughts when it comes, you've been in the health service for a while. I've seen enormous change in my lifetime. I was a clinical doctor for a while, but the changes have been profound. There is increasing burden of care. We've got a massive problem in terms of social care. What do you see on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I haven't really got time to answer that and before it gets dark. But if I could just pick out one thing.
Yes.
I'd say it's the way the staff are being treated. I think Richard Branson had this right when he said, if you look after your staff, the customers will be looked after. And I think more and more, especially in medicine, I think we're seeing the recruitment system and the allocation system and the IT systems and so many things that doctors have to deal with are just getting too difficult. And I think until they start really looking after the staff, I think offering well-being sessions is not what it's about.
No, quite. And just in terms of the management structures, I also hear that there has been a proliferation of managers and at the expense of trained clinicians.
Well, you've got another reorganisation going on at the moment, the abolition of NHS England.
Quite.
And that's going to remove a tier of management. So I think we're going to end up being back to where it was when I qualified, which is region, area and district is going to go full circle.
I mean, it seems extraordinary because, of course, we are going full circle. I saw that when the primary care trusts were then formed and then abolished and all the rest of it. So it seems that history repeats itself constantly in the NHS.
Yeah, I mean, the basic problem with the NHS always comes down to money and resources and how you allocate that money and those resources. And you can rearrange things as many times as you want, but you've still got the same problem.
Yeah. Really good to talk to you. Thank you, Richard, for your time this afternoon. That's Richard Marks, co-director of Anaesthetists United. Your thoughts, please, on all of that. I mean, some of those cases are absolutely extraordinary, where physician associates have completely overreached what they're doing. There's a case here where a physician associate punctured vital arteries during surgeries they shouldn't have actually been doing. They overdosed a patient on opioids. They tried to put an elderly patient on end-of-life care, which ties into our previous story, without actually consulting a supervising doctor. They failed to identify a clot in the leg. The patient died as a result of that. They missed simple conditions that require urgent treatment. And as I said, there's this case of someone being told they had 40 skin cancers when they didn't actually have a cancer. So clearly something needs to be done, and it needs to be done urgently. This is Chloe in Gosport. Good afternoon to you, Chloe. Physician associates. As a nurse of 35 years, I would rather be seen by an advanced nurse practitioner than a physician assistant, having followed the horror stories. Doctors on the cheap is a scandal and will attract wannabe doctors who can't make the grade. That's a great message. Thank you for that. Let's talk about, go back to migration. Tina says, David, we were in Folkestone yesterday. The sea was wild, a beautiful sunny day, but really treacherous seas. And that's why you didn't see anyone coming across on small boats. Let's go to a break now. After the break, it's your turn. Your calls, your thoughts, your messages. This is Talk.
Why has the National Crime Agency suddenly worked out that what everybody else knew is something that they've discovered?
How on earth can they be taking such a long time to wake up to what everyone else has known when they find 6 barbershops on their high street next door to each other with only 6 customers a week?
Right. And a large Mercedes parked outside, usually.
Yeah, when we broke this story, the Daily Mail, we found a street with 22 barbershops, some just lined up literally like soldiers next to each other.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This says, David, can we please have a balanced discussion about physician associates, please? How about having someone at least argue for them instead of this one-sided discussion? How about asking how many patients get misdiagnosed or injured by mistakes by doctors? I think the point we were trying to make was actually that as a medical doctor, you go through 4 or 5, well, you go through 5 years of training at medical school, and then you get your license, you're provisionally registered, then as we were hearing earlier that you're supervised. But for the physician associates, basically to a basic degree, they then only have a 2-year training, and the point we're trying to make is they are overreaching what they are legally allowed to do, and that is the point we are trying to make, but I take the point. This business of physician associates is terrifying, says Natasha. Can we demand to know who's treating us? The point, and it's a really good one, when you're treated, you must say, are you a doctor? Are you a physician associate? What are you? Can we demand to know who's treating us and refuse them if we feel they're not safe? I work in the NHS and I feel very uneasy about this. Good afternoon, David. Another wonderful afternoon seeing your smiling face on TV. That's very sweet. If it was grey outside, you would still make my day. Alison, you sweetie. As someone that is ill and suffers a great deal of pain, I support the assisted dying bill. Other options don't always succeed and can cause additional problems. I want the choice. See, I agree with you. Rebecca Wilcox, the daughter of Dame Esther Ranson, the terminally ill television presenter, also supports the bill as well. Malcolm in Hampshire says, thank you for the show. This bill is, in my view, very, very dangerous. If we look at Canada and what mission creep has produced, it's quite horrific. I have progressive neuromuscular condition. It's not too difficult for me to envisage a time when I could be encouraged to consider this. It is current form, the safeguards are minimal. Now, as part of that bill, you are not allowed to urge people to consider assisted dying without actually considering the other options as well. I don't know, I just feel that it should be on the table. The idea that you have to leave the country and go to Dignitas in a foreign country where you aren't necessarily surrounded by your friends and family, I think is pretty horrific. I also agree that actually the safeguards need to be improved. Georgina is on the line from London. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, David, you ray of sunshine. Can I just say, before I go on to my point, I actually lost my beloved mummy last year with esophageal cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And she was in, it was horrendous. She was in the most horrendous pain, actually crying out
I know.
to die. And at one point she said, baby, will you help mummy? And I said, I can't help you with this. You know, the obviously doctors and everyone have got to help you. I can't. Now, because my mother had esophageal cancer, it was not actually the cancer that killed her. It was the fact that she starved to death.
Sure.
And we had to watch that. I think this assisted dying bill has got to be looked at very carefully, and it's got to be each individual case has got to be scrutinised, and if it is an option and the person who is in the stages of dying, you know, if they want to do this, then I think they have got to have that choice.
Well, I would agree with you. And let's just look at what has to happen. You have to have 2 independent doctors to determine whether the patient actually meets the criteria. That's the first thing. Then there's this panel now of lawyers, social workers and psychiatrists. So that then sort of makes sure that you're in the right mental state. Then, when you look at the timeline, there's the assessment. Then there's a cooling off period of 7 days. Then it goes to that panel. Then there's another 14 days post-decision. So there's a total of 3 weeks, and it will remain illegal for anyone who, by dishonesty, coercion or pressure, induces someone to make a declaration that they want to take their own lives. So there are safeguards in there. The question is, are those safeguards enough? But, you know, and I am very sorry about your mum, and I've seen this, where people are crying out and saying, please, can you help me? And as someone who is in medicine to actually try and help people, it is a horrific situation to be in.
Well, it goes against everything that you are there for.
Yes.
You are there to help people live. So the dilemma you must go through is absolutely phenomenal. I wouldn't want to be in your position.
No, it's invidious, actually. The whole thing is dreadful. That's not why you called, though, is it?
No, it's not why I called.
Right, come on, then.
I've called because of this migrant invasion, which is nationwide. We know only too well the terrible effects that this migrant invasion is having on our economy. And it's also going to have a huge impact on our tourism as well. And we do rely on tourism, David. As, you know, nobody wants to come to a country with gangs of Muslims hanging around in all these different areas with nothing better to do than just sort of mosey around smoking and making communities feel very uncomfortable. But what's very unnerving for me is to see the conditioning of our indigenous woman population, mainly white, might I add, being made to feel they have to cover up before going outside to deter any unwanted or any unwarranted attention from the migrant group.
And can I just interject? Have you actually seen this? Have you seen gangs, particularly of young men? You have?
Yes, I have. And some of the comments that are made, you know, are quite unsavoury. They're quite, let's just leave it at quite unsavoury. You know, also women going out of an evening, whereas once they wouldn't have thought twice of getting dressed and going out maybe to meet, like Alex Phillips said the other night, when she goes out to meet her husband, she covers up.
I think boyfriend, but yes.
Well, boyfriend, you know, but you shouldn't have to feel that way. And now women are tending to, you know, if I go out of an evening now, I will take my husband with me. I've never done that.
Well, it's really interesting. So I mentioned being in Boston, which I was many weeks ago. I didn't feel safe in the centre of Boston. I saw lots of very young men who were clearly not up to any good. I was in Ipswich as well, and I didn't recognise the town centre of Ipswich because English was not the primary language being spoken.
Yeah. Well, I sympathise with what you're saying there because we also are going through that. But what's worrying me, David, is when you don't feel like you can put a little summer dress on in the summertime or a pair of shorts, you feel like you have to cover yourself from head to toe. And at night time, if you're going out, you need or feel safer being chaperoned, then this really is reminiscent of the Middle Eastern countries that these people are coming from in the first place. You know, it's a great concern that we shouldn't feel at home in our own home and we can't express ourselves the way we want. I mean, the next thing, it's going to be, you know, we're not allowed to go out because this will be you know, this will be sort of egging these people on. That's what's the next thing that's going to be said. You are going to have to cover up before you go outside because it's upsetting the minorities, you know. This is not right. This is not going to end well. I don't want to end up having to wear something full length and covering everything and covering my hair because it's going to attract different kind of attention than if I go out in a summer dress.
It's fascinating, and of course we're living in silos, aren't we? And I think there are huge ramifications. I was talking about this. We're going to see a change in political party makeup, for example. There will be parties that are proponents, say, of Sharia law in this country, and that it will be very interesting to see. I take the point. It's brilliantly made, though, Georgina. Thank you for your call. Great show today. This is Louise. As always, brilliant topics. Thank you. Like you, I think it used to be better when doctors could assist with extra pain relief when you know they are dying. If we can't trust our doctors, then I fear for the future humanity. This is Graham in Bushy. I have one child that's a GP, another that's a consultant anaesthetist. GP surgeries like using physician associates as the funding for them. This is a great point. Often comes out of other sources and not the GP's budget. So more profit for the practice because they don't have to pay for qualified GPs out of their own budget. Anaesthetic associates are a menace in hospitals as they need to do so much supervision and they think they can do all the things that they're not competent to do, and that's the point that Richard was making just now. Also, hospitals are trying to use them for more things, knowing that they can't really do them, so they don't have to employ so many seniors or consultants. And that's what I'm hearing from my friends who are consultants. Graham, great point. Thank you. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. We'll take a break now. After the break, I want to talk about something completely different, which is being British. And when I lived in the United States, it was very apparent that the Brits will say one thing when they mean quite the other, and that was something my American friends could never really get their heads around. But first, it's time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this very summer.
How do you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. 3:30 already. This is Talk. I'm David Bull in for Ian Collins. Right. When I lived in America, I realised that actually the British people say one thing when they mean quite something else. And this really rather bamboozled the Americans. Now, Oscar Wilde said, society feels instinctively that manners are more important than morals. British conversations regularly strewn with polite phrases that attempt to conceal seething resentment, frustration or irritation to avoid awkwardness, new research shows. This is Trinity College. They questioned 2,000 adults to create a list of the British phrases most regularly used to avoid disagreements or social discomfort. There are lots of them. People say they use polite phrases to diffuse a situation. It's a very British trait. 46% of people said they use them to be nice and avoid unnecessary tension. 60% said they hated being on the receiving end of such phrases, and they are called politisms, apparently, a fascinating feature of communication used extensively in the United Kingdom. Apparently, though, it's not new. It dates back to the 7th and 9th centuries. The use of polite language to rebuke, heavily reliant on context, just as modern-day politisms are they're found actually through the medieval period and in literary classics such as Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Well, joining me now is Grant Harold, who's a former royal butler, no less. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, I rather like this. So, for example, if someone says to you, sounds fun, I'll let you know. It actually means I'm not coming.
Yes, exactly. This is the thing about us as Brits, is I think we do say one thing to be polite, while meaning another. And I think we never want to offend or upset anybody. And I do it all the time. I mean, I'll say to somebody, oh, that sounds amazing. I look forward to it, where you're probably thinking, gosh, I couldn't forget anything worse. But you don't want to say that to them. So we're too polite. That's the thing, David. We're too polite.
Well, I love it. And then when, particularly when you're in a meeting and you say, with all due respect, which means actually you're a moron. Have I lost you? I think I have lost you. I wasn't actually calling you a moron. Loads of others are here. Sorry, could you say that last bit again? Means, actually, I wasn't listening to a word you were saying. How true that is. I'll bear it in mind. I'll bear that in mind. What a brilliant comment. It actually means I'll forget about it immediately, and it's a ridiculous point that you're making. Oh, that's one way of looking at it. The translation of that, you're wildly off the mark. Just a gentle reminder, I can't believe you haven't actually done it already. So loads and loads of those comments. I would appreciate it if you could let me know either way. The translation of that, I can't believe you've not replied. It is so true. Never have two countries been so divided by a common language. We're happy to discuss your idea. I can't think of anything worse than discussing it further. That's a really terrible idea. We'll try and get Grant back on the line as soon as possible. Keep all of your messages coming in, please. In the interim, I'm just asking, given the tariff issue, are we actually seeing the second Brexit dividend? But Grant rejoins us now. Grant, sorry we lost you there for a second. I was just saying that basically we're using all of these expressions. There are some brilliant ones here where you say, I'm sure it's just me, which means, no, it's actually you.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. We're always being polite. Everything we say, there's always a double meaning to it. And I think that's the thing about Brits. We're too polite. And everybody...
Oh, we can't.
Does it. From, can I say, from even the royal family are masters when it comes to politeness.
Now, I don't know how much you can tell us about the royal family. You say they're masters. Give us an example.
But the thing is, you know, I think people forget that, like, all of us, you can have a bad day, can't you? Even if you're a member of the royal family. And even if you have a bad day, you're still going to be polite to people. So somebody might say to the, you know, member of the royal family, say the king, oh, I'd love you to come to my, whatever the event is, or a party or something, being polite. And of course, the royal's going to say, oh, that sounds delightful. That will be wonderful. But of course, the reality is that's not going to happen.
No,
Possibly it's not going to happen.
It's really not going to happen.
That's what I mean, is even they do it.
Did you work with the late Queen by any chance?
I knew her. Yes, I was there when she was alive, so I used to kind of get to look after her from time to time.
Is it true that she used to use expressions which meant take me away from this imbecile? Like, for example, I think it was the Queen Mother, actually, the late Queen Mother, who used to say, I think we'll have rain by tea time.
Yeah. Yes, I think what she used to do, apparently, from what I understand, it was a handbag. The handbag was the symbol of when it was time to move on. So rather than say anything, the handbag would be moved into a certain position, which meant it was time to move away from that person. Not to say that person was boring or there was any problem. It was just it was time to move on. So the Queen, being one of the most diplomatic and polite ladies, she used the handbag apparently as a way of signalling it was time to move on.
Now, I can't help noticing you're very well dressed there, and you have a fitted suit on. Obviously, being sartorially elegant is important to you.
I've always been at this, David. I think also, you know, with my work and with what I do, being a former royal butler, people can expect that if I go around, can I say, because of my social media and because of a lot of the work that I do, there's quite a few people that kind of recognise me and know me. And the interesting thing is, if I'm, because at the moment I'm on a ship just now where I'm giving some talks, and there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of people here that know me, and it's interesting. If I go around in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, they literally don't recognise me. As soon as I'm in a suit, they recognise me. So I always think that, you know, that's the thing about the way you dress, also gives off a certain kind of thing about you. So I think it's important to dress the correct way for different things.
Well, I would agree with you. Do you think standards are slipping in the UK?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, for goodness sake, David, I went to my local superstore recently, and there was somebody in there wearing a pair of pyjamas. Do you know what I mean? So that's how bad it's becoming. Literally a pair of pyjamas.
In your line of work, though, and I wonder if you would agree with this, I think what you wear actually changes your performance. So if you're wearing a nice suit, for example, in your job, you will behave in a certain way. If you're wearing a pair of beach shorts, you'll behave in a very different way.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think that what you're wearing reflects you. For example, as you just said, if I'm wearing a pair of shorts or a t-shirt, I mean, I would never dream to go and do a talk or a speech in front of people dressed like that, because they're not going to take you seriously. But if you're dressed in the correct attire, they do. That's why, can I say, members of the royal family, when they give speeches, they're not normally in Speedos or swimwear, or, you know, they're normally dressed as we expect them to be dressed, because you take those people seriously, and if they're not dressed the correct way, how do you take somebody seriously? That's why, you know, when it comes to government or royals or VIPs, they dress a certain way, because that's what's expected.
And in your experience, can you tell about a person by the way they are dressed?
You normally can. It's interesting you say that. I met somebody today, actually, and they were immaculately dressed. And you can almost, to an extent, you can almost tell their background. And what I mean by that is, and I'm not trying to say we should be judging people, but if you have somebody come up to you and they're in a pair of jogging bottoms and a t-shirt, and the dress code is supposed to be chinos, smart shirt, jacket, and that's how they're dressed, you get a rough idea they have no idea. You know, they've got no idea about dress codes, and then you can think, well, obviously their background, they're not used to that. But if you have somebody that's immaculately dressed, you think, well, that's obviously you know, you can almost read people just by the way they dress. I think not always the case. It isn't always the case. But 9 times out of 10.
Well, I think one of the giveaways. I think one of the giveaways.
First impressions.
Sorry, carry on.
So I was going to say first impressions. We always judge people within 3 seconds. Really important.
Yes, that's absolutely true. I think one of the other things, is the way that men tie their ties, and I think that I fall into the bad category. But the king always dresses immaculately. He probably has a half Windsor knot on his tie. Your comment on that?
You're right. He normally goes for half Windsor. I think sometimes he's gone for the full Windsor.
Oh.
And you're right. He's. I mean, even was it GQ? Called him the best dressed man at one point. So he always dresses immaculately. I never saw him in anything less than what you expect, even behind closed doors. He's always immaculately dressed.
How fascinating. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry the line has been so bad. Thank you very much indeed for your time, though, Grant. Really good to talk to you. Grant there very kindly breaking off his holiday to talk to us from a cruise ship. Grant Harold there, former royal butler. This is quite interesting. Good afternoon, David. This is Brad. Being overly polite can cause real issues. A friend of mine had a telephone appointment with the hospital, and the doctor she was speaking to spoke very little English. When she came off the phone, she had no idea what he'd said, and she didn't like to tell him. That's Brad in Cambridge, I agree. David, I love your politisms. You reading them out, I suddenly thought, oh no, that's me. Yes, I know. I love all of those. Particularly when you say, that sounds like a lovely idea, which means I have no intention at all of following that through whatsoever. Keep all of your messages coming in, please, because I'm asking this afternoon, with the tariffs and Trump's tariffs and the UK escaping with 10%, even though obviously there is a massive impact on that, is this the second Brexit dividend that we're seeing? And of course it means that the Remainers can go nowhere with that. Let's take a call though. Mark is on the line from Carlisle. Good afternoon.
Hi, just about your associates in medical care, etc. I've got an example for you. I'm very fit. I normally train 10 miles a day, 41 miles a weekend. I'm a filmmaker and we film with the military. And on my 60th birthday, I decided to do a 60-mile hike. 3 days later, got massive pain, went into A&E, and they sent me home with paracetamol. And they persuaded me it was an associate. Never got to the clinical side. It was just the doctor's side. Anyways, lying in bed, bedridden, spoke to my GP who's in London, fantastic woman. She recognised the symptoms and phoned me an ambulance from London to Cumbria, my cabin in the woods. I got brought in, but again, you just shoved into A&E from the ambulance.
Yeah, I know.
Again, they misdiagnosed me, and I was getting dragged out into the car park physically by the security and an associate. Luckily, a doctor, a surgeon, was walking past, recognized the symptoms, got me straight in. I was in surgery that night. I had a burst appendix.
Oh, my goodness.
And all the pus had been going out for 6 days or whatever. Into the cavities.
So that's extraordinary. But was your abdomen, was your tummy rigid?
I thought it was constipation myself, but my GP knew exactly what it was. But they misdiagnosed me again, and because I started a ruckus, I was actually in agony, curled around a chair, etc., and in agony in the A&E, and basically. Because I was making noise, that's antisocial, so they got the security. They were physically dragging me into the car park when the surgeon seen me, got me in, surgery that night. It went from a keyhole to a open surgery conversion. Yep. Many, many more hours, much more dangerous. 5 weeks in hospital fighting the infections. Yes. Infections from my pelvic cavities all the way up to my chest. Around the appendix, by the way, it was as big as a fist in pus, and they couldn't see it, so they were going to chop my bowel. And before the surgery, they warned me, they said, if it's your right bowel, that's okay, we'll chop it and join it. If it's your left bowel, you've got a bag for the rest of your life. Yeah. And that's what I was facing. Anyways, I didn't... When they eventually got me into EDEC, it's called, EDEC, emergency place, it was like private room and all that. Now, I didn't want to complain because they were fantastic and the surgeon saved my life. And, so one side is absolutely fantastic and I can't fault it, but there's two rush to diagnosis. And it turned out, I heard this when I was in agony, they're running around because there was no beds in the Cumberland Infirmary in Carlisle. And both times I got misdiagnosed, by understaff, by these associate people, there was no beds. So they were rushing. First, imagine getting sent home with paracetamol. And I was reluctant to go back. It was my GP who got me in with an ambulance, and they were still trying to get rid of me. But there you go. There's an example. I can't fault the aftercare after the surgery, the 5 weeks, and I'm still under surgeon's care now.
Golly, I mean, look, you're lucky to be alive, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they said. One of the juniors, it was a big teaching hospital, and there's like a balcony with loads of students with clipboards.
I'm sure.
I remember that. And there's one of the understudies to the surgeon, because he's a genius guy, he's an Asian guy. I'm not allowed to buy him a present, by the way, because, I thought I was dying, so I was going to leave the surgeon my land and all. He says, no, you can't. And I caused a big ruckus because I was leaving presents to everyone who saved my life. Anyways, the understudy said, oh, I've got to congratulate you. You must be a fit guy because you don't normally see that much infection and survival.
Yeah.
And he says, because you were fit. And he said, I've got some bad news for you. He says, what? He says, when you went in, you had a 6-pack, and we've given you a big scar from your sternum down to your groin. You've now got a 12-pack.
Hey, well done, Mark. Brilliant story. Thank you. I think that highlights the dangers of the physician associates and their overreach of what they should be doing. Brilliant call, though, Mark. Thank you for that. We'll take a break now. After the break, let's get some more of your calls and your thoughts. Let me just tell you this one. Jog on is my favourite way of saying you're too stupid to have an argument with. That's Chris. Thank you for that. This is Talk.
I think he would always be afforded a degree of security. He's just got to let people know what he's doing, because I'm absolutely sure he is not going to be left with no security should he come here. But as long as he briefs people where he's coming, what he's doing, then I think it's probably likely to happen. What the defence from the Home Office is as he's no longer a working member of Royal, he comes into a different category. And that's where the grey area is about. But I'm pretty sure that he is never going to be left without security.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Can I just squeeze past you? That means, can you please get out of my way? I beg your pardon, that means I'm fuming. These are brilliant, actually. Lots of you getting in touch as well. David, this is a politism I use a lot. It's really wow, which means you're a big-headed prat, aren't you? Sally, thank you for that as well. This one from Caroline, good afternoon. Well, look, Grant Harold would actually hate to live in New Zealand because sometimes you see people doing their shopping in pyjamas. Their dressing gowns and bare feet, ghastly. Far too laid back, they are, quite right as well. So in the States where I lived for a while, they just didn't understand anything. And of course, they just take everything very, very literally. And the Brits certainly had a different way of talking. Good afternoon, David. This is Angie. I took my mum to the bank yesterday, and as we walked in, we were approached by a dishevelled man in a faded polo shirt. He had jogging bottoms on. He was really scruffy, the scruffy trainers. He said, "Can I help you?" I swerved away and said, "No, thanks," thinking he was some sort of weirdo hanging around in the bank. Now, as we queued up, it became aware that actually he was the meet and greet at the bank. Sorry, but it seemed very unprofessional to me. Quite right. Of course it was unprofessional. Ridiculous. Lots of others coming in about the tariffs. David, and we talked about this earlier, Reg in Southampton, unless I'm mistaken, there seems to be no tariffs for Russia or North Korea. I need to double check that. How spooky is that? Howard in Suffolk, Starmer doesn't understand making a deal. He needs to work out what leverage we have. Perhaps threaten to throw out American air bases in the UK if higher tariffs above 10% are considered. Charles de Gaulle ordered all foreign military forces, including the Americans, to leave French soil in 1966. Starmer does not have the stomach to play hardball. This is Fabrice from Chatham. That's a lovely name, Fabrice. In relation to Trump's tariffs, I can see a definite economic benefit to the UK. We can tell the EU to route all their trade to the USA via the UK. And in exchange, we'll only charge them an 11% tariff. It's a win-win. Well said like that. This also from Cliff, afternoon. I think the introduction of tariffs illustrates perfectly why we should ensure that we are self-sufficient in all areas, including power, food, steel and manufacturing. Quite right, SMRs, that's what we need to do. Frack, we need to produce our own energy because we have a massive energy gap in this country. Talking about energy, Graham's on the line from Berkshire. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. David. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks very much indeed. Enjoying my politisms because they're so true. But anyway, you want to talk about energy, I believe.
Yes, I noticed from, dare I say, the Telegraph,
That's okay.
and a couple of other places, that in 2024 it cost us £1 billion to turn off the turbines.
That's right.
Apparently 180,000 per hour. Now, some people will tell you that, oh, well, the infrastructure is not there for them and the government needs to build the infrastructure. The rails weren't there when they applied to actually pay for the rails to be put in place, the original railways in the UK. And if I overproduce a particular product, I don't get the customer to pay me. You know?
I know.
And you add to that the fact that most of this equipment is bought from China.
Yes.
I mean, I wonder how Beijing Barry is these days.
Well, but it seems to me it's just no planning. So that if it's too windy, you have to turn them off. If there's not enough wind, they don't produce anything. Then we can't store it. Now they want to have pylons all over Suffolk and Essex, and and so on and so forth. They don't care. They're going to blight people's communities. They're blinking ugly. And actually, there's a big study showing that if you buried them now, those new power transmission lines, in the long run, although it's more expensive now, it would pay dividends in the future.
Yeah, you're not going to get wind damage and
100%.
all this sort of thing.
Exactly.
But we do waste an awful lot of money in this country. And when we look at things like something like 170,000 Met police going to be laid off?
Well, yeah, so he's cutting the budget for the police, but he's increasing the amount of money he's spending on net zero. This is Sadiq Khan, the London mayor.
Yeah, well, we ought to take the Metropolitan Police away from him because it's been in special measures for too long. But money's being wasted in the National Health Service. Though I will say, can I just say that I went to see the paramedic clinic at RGP's and she was brilliant.
Right, but there's a difference, isn't there, between a paramedic and a physician associate? And I think what we're trying to highlight this afternoon is those physician associates are passing off as being doctors. There's overreach and they're doing things they shouldn't be doing. And the point I was trying to make was that initial diagnosis is absolutely crucial, because when you make that diagnosis, you then go down a treatment pathway. Now, if that original diagnosis is wrong, which is what we heard from our previous caller, then, of course, everything you're doing is wrong as well.
Yes, I mean, this particular, they call them a specialist paramedic, so I don't know what they do.
I'm not sure how much training they have, but also they also know what remit they can do.
Yeah.
What did you see the paramedic for?
A very tight muscle in one leg that was very stiff and seemed swollen. She looked at it, she measured it, she felt it. Next thing, she's gone out to see the GP, and there's an appointment for me that day to go and see the hospital for a blood clot.
Fantastic. I mean, when it works really well. And also, the concern is that the NHS is trying to cut costs, and this is what I hear from my friends the whole time, which is they're cutting very experienced consultants. Of course, they cost more money, and they're bringing in people who are less well qualified, who really shouldn't be in those jobs at all. And of course, the government, under the plan, and this was the last government, is trying to increase the number of physician associates up to, and anaesthetic associates up to 10,000.
Well, I think certainly with the paramedics, they've had field experience, which these people, the people you're talking about, they haven't. Because the particular paramedic I've seen before, and I've known that she's done at least 6 years on the ambulances.
Can I just ask you, just generally, your experience of the health service? We were talking about this yesterday, spending 180 billion or thereabouts on the health service, 11.7% of GDP on the health service. The gentleman I spoke to yesterday was saying that actually we need to increase the spend on the NHS. Is that the way forward?
Well, right, I'll start by saying I use quite a bit of it on the grounds I have mild form of cerebral palsy.
Right.
But I think we spend the money in the wrong way.
I would agree. I would totally agree. Graham, thanks very much for your call this afternoon. Really good to talk to you, Jeremy Carr. Good afternoon.
Look at that. Look at you. Just one cornetto.
Listen, this is how
Give it to me.
You're meant to dress like this.
I know you
not
look
like that.
Honestly, I am embarrassed. I'm always quite impressed about how tight your shirts are.
Thank you very much.
And
it's
how
muscle.
It's rippling muscle.
It's muscle.
How are you?
I'm all right, thanks very much.
I don't usually work on a Thursday.
No, that's why I'm so surprised to see you. I mean, it's such a joy. I watched your thing last night.
Did you?
Yes.
And?
I want to know more. I feel there's more to come from that interview.
Right.
Yes.
Do you?
I don't think it was in depth enough.
What do you want to know?
I want to know more about your background. I want to know more about what motivates you. I think Kate just scratched the surface.
She did?
Yes.
Yeah. Much more to come, trust me. Wait to see.
Yeah,
anyway.
You tease.
What?
You tease.
You love it. Go on, help me out. What's
so tariffs again? We're still.
It can't be. Is it of any interest to
Yes,
anybody?
it is actually. Because,
why?
Well, I said to Julia, and I got told off for pronouncing Ursula von der Leyen's name wrong, which I still think is the right way to say it. But anyway,
don't argue.
No, I didn't. I just went, yes, Your Majesty. But
yes.
I did laugh when the EU was slapped with double the tariffs that we got.
I don't have the intelligence that you have, but is it fair and right to say that Donald Trump is doing his best to make sure that he looks after America?
Yes.
Would we not crave to have a leader who did the same in the United Kingdom?
Yes.
Was not the reason of leaving the EU so that we made ourselves successful, made our goods
100%.
well and sold them? Why don't we
100%.
do what Germany did after the Second World War and disappear into ourselves and make things that are so attractive to the rest of the world that tariffs are irrelevant? Or have I missed the
No,
point?
you're absolutely right. And if you cut the tariffs in this country, then
Yes.
Donald Trump will respond appropriately and cut tariffs to us.
Could not agree more.
Well,
female
that's the end of that,
fencer
then.
disqualified for refusing to face transgender woman.
Say that again.
A female fencer was disqualified
Yes.
from a tournament after taking a knee and refusing to compete against a transgender opponent.
Right.
Thoughts on that?
Not really.
To jab somebody in the bits, do you, with your sword? I've no idea.
It's interesting, actually, how much the trans kind of thing gets attention, isn't it? When
I tell you what it
numbers are
does to
quite
me,
low.
and this is me at my most serious. You know all those people, and we know them,